November 11, 2013, a cold autumn evening in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. Along a quiet stretch of road near the Susquehanna Valley Mall, the silence was broken when two local residents discovered something on the ground. A man lay face down, completely motionless. His clothes were soaked in blood, and his belongings were scattered around him. The faint glow of his phone screen still lit up the night. Emergency responders arrived quickly. It was immediately clear this wasn't an accident. The man had been stabbed multiple times, his body showing unmistakable signs of a brutal attack. The number of wounds suggested this wasn't random violence, but a calculated killing, designed to make sure he would not survive. No car was nearby. There were no obvious tire marks, just a few footprints leading toward the road, partly blurred by recent rain. The area was sparsely populated, and no one had witnessed the attack. Under gray skies and damp air, police began piecing together what they could. The victim's phone gave them their first lead. It wasn't locked, and investigators quickly saw calls from the night before. 2 incoming, 1 outgoing. The last number dialed wasn't saved in his contacts. There is nothing else to go on. It didn't take long to confirm the man's identity. He was Troy LaFerrara, 42 years old, an electrical engineer from nearby. Police didn't release much information publicly right away, but they knew one thing for certain. Troy had not been chosen at random. The killer had lured him here. To understand how the story reached this point, you have to go back almost 2 decades and more than 3,000 miles away to North Pole, Alaska. Despite its festive name and candy cane lampposts, life there is anything but cheerful. Winters can plunge below 15 degrees below zero, and fewer than 3,000 residents endure the isolation and relentless cold. It was in this environment that Miranda Barber was born in 1994. Her parents' relationship quickly fell apart, leaving her mother, Elizabeth Dean, to raise Miranda and her older sister, Ashley, mostly on her own. Their father remained distant. As a child, Miranda was diagnosed with a congenital hip disorder. The joint hadn't formed correctly, leaving her in pain, limiting her ability to walk and play. For 2 years, she was forced to wear a corrective brace, a reminder of the physical struggles she faced from an early age. Eventually, the family moved closer to Elizabeth's relatives. Miranda often visited her sister's home, where she lived with her husband, Richard Fernandez. Miranda and Ashley, just 5 and 6 years old, often spent time there after school. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but behind closed doors, Richard revealed a much darker side. Over several years, he abused both girls in ways too disturbing to imagine. He threatened them, manipulated their silence, and instilled a deep fear that kept them from speaking out. They carried the burden in silence, never telling even their mother. That silence broke when Ashley finally confided in Elizabeth. The revelation devastated her, but she acted immediately, taking both daughters to the authorities. Richard was arrested. He was convicted and sentenced to 19 years in prison. Though he was later released early, he offended again and was sent back to prison, where he remains today. However, Richard's arrest didn't erase the trauma he left behind. Healing was slow, if it happened at all. Miranda became distant, anxious, and emotionally fragile, while Elizabeth began to unravel under the weight of it all. Her dependence on alcohol and other substances worsened, and her mood grew increasingly unstable. At times, she tried to be present for her daughters, but those efforts were inconsistent and often ineffective. The home environment collapsed into emotional chaos, made worse by financial strain and the lack of any outside support. It felt as though all three were trapped in a downward spiral. When Miranda turned 9, Elizabeth made a drastic decision They left North Pole. She wanted a fresh start, but moving away was easier than escaping the past. Ashley kept her distance, focusing on school, part-time jobs, and friends as a way to avoid the dysfunction at home. Miranda reacted differently. She withdrew inward, spending more time alone, moody and volatile. Her behavior increasingly unpredictable. By age 12, Miranda entered a new phase. She began spending time with an older crowd already immersed in smoking, drinking, and banned substance use. Despite being much younger, she slipped into the group with ease. At first, she only watched, but soon she joined in cigarettes, alcohol, pills. It quickly became normal. She started disappearing for hours or days at a time. Often, her mother didn't notice. Or if she did, her reaction was muted. Miranda would drift back home without explanation, and no one pressed for answers. School became another battleground. Her attitude grew combative. She picked fights, hurled insults, and lashed out at peers and teachers. Multiple suspensions followed. Her academics stalled, and her behavior worsened in every direction. It was around this period that Miranda began talking about someone named Forrest, a man she described as being in his 20s. She claimed he belonged to a group that practiced dark, ritualistic ceremonies, and that after participating in one of their rites, she belonged to him. She told her mother about these encounters. Elizabeth tried to intervene, forbidding Miranda from further contact. Miranda's response was to ignore. The existence of Forrest was never verified. Authorities later found no records, no witnesses, no tangible sign of such a group. To outsiders, it seemed like one of Miranda's fabrications, stories she often told when she felt neglected. But to her, it appeared real. She spoke and acted as though she had been changed by him. Her fascination with ritual, submission, and sacrifice deepened. In her mind, this was the moment she lost control. At home, there was no stability, and at school no one intervened. Miranda was in freefall. By 14, her behavior had become dangerously volatile. Her moods swung wildly, and her relationships with others were increasingly toxic. At one point, she attempted self-harm. The details were kept private, but it was serious enough to require medical attention. For the first and only time, her biological father stepped in, not to provide support, but simply to sign the paperwork that allowed her admission to a psychiatric facility. He played no further role. During her stay, Miranda was diagnosed with depressive disorder and prescribed medication. Doctors recommended ongoing therapy, but her time there was short. Once discharged, she returned to the same unstable home, her mother still struggling with addiction, her sister occupied with her own life. No adult provided consistent guidance or care. She never went back to school in any meaningful way. Although she was technically still in school, she stopped attending. Her education effectively ended. Instead, she drifted further into the company of older friends, her social circle shifting constantly. Her lifestyle aged her prematurely, not in maturity, but in exposure to danger. She kept using banned substance, sought out risky situations, and frequently stayed away from home. There were no steady relationships, no anchors. By the time Miranda was 17, she discovered she was pregnant. Even she was unsure who the father was. There were several possibilities, but no certainty. Still, she chose to continue the pregnancy. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe a desire to hold on to something that felt real. Despite the chaos around her, the pregnancy went ahead without major complications. Though she received little medical care, on schedule, she gave birth to a baby girl she named Aria. With Aria's arrival, Miranda now had someone she was directly responsible for. But instead of bringing stability, motherhood brought new complications. The family's situation deteriorated quickly. Elizabeth was in deep crisis. Ashley had already moved out, and social services became involved to review custody. Given Miranda's young age and Elizabeth's instability, the authorities determined she couldn't raise Aria alone. Guardianship was transferred to relatives living in North Carolina. On paper, it was a fresh start. But the damage inside Miranda didn't disappear. Aria became her anchor, but not her cure. In North Carolina, Miranda and her baby moved in with distant relatives. The environment appeared more stable. Child services approved the placement and scheduled regular visits. But beneath the surface, Miranda felt detached. Once again, she withdrew. It was in this house that she met Elit Barber. He was 20 at the time and often visited because of his close friendship with one of the family members. Elit already had a girlfriend, Amy, who was expecting their child. Miranda, meanwhile, was caring for newborn Aria. Despite their circumstances, Miranda and Elit connected almost immediately. Elit had a fascination with unusual beliefs. He talked openly about cults, rituals, and symbolic power, not as fantasy, but as something real to him. Instead of dismissing it, Miranda leaned in. Her past claims of involvement with a supposed ritualistic group seemed to draw them closer. They discussed sacrifice, control, and the meaning of power, not as stories, but as shared truths. At first, Amy didn't view Miranda as a threat. The two even spent time together, walking their babies side by side. But their differences soon became obvious. Amy wanted stability. Miranda didn't. She thrived on risk and embraced conversations others would avoid. Elit began pulling away from Amy, and not long after their child was born, Amy left. She took the baby with her, ending the relationship without much explanation. Whatever the reason, the split was final. Elit stayed with Miranda. From there, their bond deepened quickly. Before long, they were living together. Their conversations about rituals became less abstract, more personal, even practical. They convinced themselves they shared something rare, different from everyone else. Their world narrowed to just the two of them. Decisions were made together. Outsiders' opinions meant nothing. They isolated themselves, spending nearly all their time alone, and spoke often about creating something meaningful, not a family or a future, but something unique, belonging only to them. Within months, Miranda and Elit married. There was no celebration, no relatives present. Most family members disapproved anyway, because of their instability, their banned substance use, and their obsession with dark themes. But they wasn't looking for approval. To them, the marriage was an act of defiance, not a tradition. After the wedding, they chose to leave North Carolina behind. Neither had steady work or prospects. Elit had little job experience. Miranda had no education, and supporting themselves seemed impossible. They wanted to escape family, expectations, and society altogether. Their destination was Port Trevorton, a tiny, isolated community in Pennsylvania. Elit knew someone there who offered them a place to stay temporarily. The town had fewer than 500 residents, no public transportation, and limited infrastructure. But for Miranda and Elit, it was perfect. No attention, no oversight, no one watching. Together with Aria, they moved into the friend's home, rent-free, retreating further into their own world. But money ran out quickly. They survived on food and essentials provided by odd jobs and the generosity of their host. Elit tried to find steady work, sending out resumes and attending interviews, but nothing came of it. His lack of experience, his demeanor, even his appearance seemed to work against him. Miranda took a different route. She turned to an online classified site, a place where people posted everything from furniture, sales, to services. She created a profile offering herself as a companion, not in an intimate sense, but for company at social events, dinners, and outings. She insisted she had done it before and didn't consider it shameful. A response came almost immediately. A man named Troy LaFerrara, 42 years old, replied. He was married, employed in the tech industry, and financially comfortable. In his messages, he expressed interest in meeting, but hinted at wanting more than just casual companionship. The amount of money he offered was substantial, far above what Miranda usually saw. That fact alone caught her attention. She showed the messages to Alit, and instead of being bothered, he focused on the money. Together, they began discussing possibilities. What started as a way to earn extra income shifted into something far darker. The idea evolved quickly. The site wasn't just a way to find clients, it was the perfect tool to set a trap. On the surface, Troy looked like a model citizen. A steady job as an engineer at an IT company, a suburban home, and a reputation as a responsible husband. Neighbors thought of him as devoted and respectable. He had no criminal record, no visible issues. But beneath that exterior, Troy was living a double life. Away from his family, he used online platforms to arrange private encounters with women. He regularly browsed ads, messaged profiles, and set up meetings, all while keeping it secret. His family had no idea. When he found Miranda's post, he was intrigued. While her ad didn't explicitly promise anything physical, its tone suggested flexibility. Troy reached out, asking about details, and the conversation soon moved to private messages. He offered payment well above average. That was enough for Miranda to say yes. To Troy, it looked like a discreet arrangement. In reality, it was a trap waiting to be sprung. November 11, 2013. The meeting place was a shopping center parking lot. Troy pulled into the agreed-upon spot. Miranda was already there. He climbed into her car, handed her the money, and settled in. He was calm, relaxed, maybe even comfortable. Their destination had already been chosen, a quiet rural road, far from town, where no one would pass by. In the trunk, hidden under a blanket, illudele una blanque, he waited for Miranda's signal word. The car rolled through the darkness. A few miles out, Miranda slowed and pulled over. She turned to Troy and asked, "Did you see the stars tonight?" That was the cue. A lit burst from the trunk, wrapping electrical wire around Troy's neck. The attack was sudden, but Troy didn't collapse immediately. He fought back with desperate strength, clawing at the wire, even managing to push the door open and get one leg outside. Miranda, seeing headlights approaching in the distance, knew they had little time. She pulled out a knife and stabbed him, again and again, in the chest, stomach, and neck. 20 times in total. The intensity of the attack revealed a deep rage. Troy stopped fighting. Elit slammed the door shut. They drove off, with his body still in the car. After several miles, they turned onto a secluded road. They dragged Troy out, took his wallet, cash, watch, and left the rest. His phone was still there by accident. They dumped the body in a roadside ditch, making no effort to hide it. Afterward, they drove to Walmart. There, they picked up cleaning supplies, bleach, brushes, gloves, and wipes. Every item was paid for in cash. Using money taken from Troy's wallet, they cleaned the car later that night, far from the scene, scrubbing the seats, mats, and doors. The wire used in the attack was discarded along the way. Once finished, they went out to eat. It was Elit's birthday, and they chose a nicer restaurant, ordering full meals and drinks. Again, they paid in cash. By the next morning, Life seemed to continue as normal. Neither of them showed signs of fear, panic, or regret. The following morning, Troy LaFerrara's body was found on the side of a rural road. He was partially covered by tall grass, but otherwise left in the open. Scattered nearby were some of his clothes and his cell phone. That phone became the breakthrough. It was still powered on, and recent calls and messages were easy to retrieve. One number appeared multiple times. Investigators traced it to a registered SIM card belonging to Miranda Barber. Detectives went to the address listed with the phone record. Miranda agreed to come to the station, told it was just a routine check linked to Troy's phone activity. During the first interview, she appeared calm, even cooperative. She denied knowing Troy, insisting they had never met. She suggested she might have accidentally answered a call from a stranger, but claimed no knowledge beyond that. When asked about her use of the online classified site, she hesitated briefly before saying she hadn't logged in for months. The interview went on for about an hour, but when detectives asked to look through her phone, her demeanor changed instantly. She refused, saying they would need a warrant. Her tone turned defensive. Officers noted the sudden shift, but lacking grounds to detain her, they let her go. Back at the house where she was staying, Miranda unraveled. Hours later, she admitted to a friend that she had been involved in Troy's death. She provided names, motives, even details of the night. The friend was horrified. He urged her to confess, warning that if she didn't, he would go to the police himself. Around 4:00 a.m., Miranda returned to the station and asked to see the lead investigator. This time, she said she was ready to tell the truth, but immediately reframed it. She claimed the killing had been self-defense. She explained that she met Troy through her ad, but during their encounter, he became aggressive. She said she panicked, grabbed a knife, and stabbed him. She never mentioned the wire. She never mentioned Elite. Her story didn't match the evidence. The sheer number of stab wounds, the strangulation marks, and other signs all pointed to more than one attacker. Investigators knew her account was only the beginning of a series of lies. With Miranda's partial confession on record, attention shifted to Elite Barber. He was at the house when Miranda returned from the station, calm and silent. Even after learning she had admitted involvement with Troy, he didn't appear shaken. Detectives brought him in for questioning. He didn't resist. His answers were brief. He denied knowing about Troy, denied leaving the house that day, denied any involvement. Investigators later obtained surveillance footage from a nearby shopping mall. On the video, just before Miranda's meeting with Troy, a man could be seen climbing into the back seat of her car. The footage was clear enough to confirm it was Elite. When shown the video, his story shifted. In a second interview, Elite admitted his role. He described the plan in detail, explaining that both he and Miranda had agreed on the setup. The wire and the knife had been chosen beforehand. He spoke with no hesitation, no visible emotion. The lead investigator described his tone as detached, almost clinical. A forensic psychologist later observed that even while describing the moment of Troy's death, Elite's voice stayed steady, flat, and completely without remorse. Elite Barber was then formally arrested. When investigators compared their statements, it became clear her self-defense claim didn't hold up. The evidence showed the attack had been planned in advance, coordinated, and deliberately carried out. On the surface, the case seemed clear. One victim, two perpetrators, confessions, and supporting forensic proof. But it shifted after a phone call from jail. Miranda contacted a journalist, not to plead for sympathy or reduce her sentence, but to make a shocking claim. In the interview, she said Troy LaFerrara wasn't her first victim. According to her, there were 22 others. She offered no names, dates, or locations. just a vague statement that she had lost count after 20. The story spread quickly, and headlines labeled her a female serial killer. Police had to take the claim seriously. Investigations were reopened, and Miranda was questioned directly. Who were these victims? Where? When? But her answers remained inconsistent and vague. Authorities checked missing persons cases across several states where she had lived, but nothing matched. No bodies, no witnesses, no evidence. Her family soon spoke out. Her father, her sister, and others close to her all described a lifelong pattern of attention-seeking. As a child, Miranda often told elaborate stories that placed herself at the center. They believed this confession was no different, a way for her to control the narrative and stay in the spotlight. Elu, however, seemed to believe her. During one of his recorded interviews, he said Miranda had told him similar stories in private. He described how her personality shifted when she spoke about them, as though she became someone else entirely. He even gave that side of her a name, Super Miranda. To him, it felt like she was possessed by something darker, something he couldn't fully understand. He claimed he sometimes believed he lived with two Mirandas. Eventually, the case moved to trial. The courtroom atmosphere was subdued, no emotional outbursts, no visible remorse. Miranda Barber and Elit Barber stood silently as the judge handed down their sentences. They were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Their expressions, captured on camera, were flat and unreadable. Months later, another tragedy followed. Miranda's mother, Elizabeth, died of an overdose. There was no note left behind. Family members later said she had struggled with mental and emotional instability for years. The collapse of her daughter's life, the public disgrace, and the disintegration of her family pushed her over the edge. She was found alone in her home. As for Miranda's young daughter, Aria, she was first placed in temporary care after her mother's arrest. Following Elizabeth's death in 2016, the state assumed full custody. Very little information about her has been released, apart from one detail: her last name was legally changed for her protection. Her current whereabouts remain undisclosed.
Hey detectives. Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lisa Holm. Lisa Holm was born on February 7, 1998 in a small town in Sweden. It is a peaceful place where she lives with her parents and older sister. Lisa is a kind, positive, and determined person. Even before finishing her studies, she decided that she wanted to go to Australia to study architecture. Lisa has also had a lot of experience traveling with her family, visiting many other countries. In the summer of 2015, when Lisa turned 17, she finally found her first job at a cafe about a 40-minute drive from home. During the first few weeks, her parents still drove her to work. However, not long after, her father decided to buy her a scooter so that she could get around on her own. Lisa had this type of driver's license before she turned 18, which is the age required to apply for a car driver's license. She was very happy to receive this gift because it was an opportunity for her to go to work by herself without having to rely on others. However, in the first few weeks, her father still accompanied her by car because Lisa lacked experience driving on the road. She only worked on weekends, and her father accompanied her every morning and evening. This habit continued until June 7th, when he finally allowed her to drive herself to the cafe. Around lunchtime, her parents decided to visit her at work and have lunch together. That day, the cafe was quite crowded, so Lisa was very busy with work. She took a short break to have lunch with her parents, then they returned home. At 6:23 p.m., Lisa sent a text message to her father saying that she was coming home. Just 3 minutes later, her father received a call from Lisa, but no one answered. He heard some voices in the background and thought that Lisa had accidentally called his number while talking to her colleague. He also heard the sound of a car door closing. He called Lisa's name several times, but no one answered. Then, he ended the call and started waiting for her to come home. However, she did not appear. After an hour, Lisa's parents began to worry. They thought something might have happened to her on the way since she should have arrived by now. This was the first time she had ridden a scooter alone, and her father was very concerned about her safety. He tried calling her several times, but Lisa's phone was turned off. After waiting for a while, her father decided to set off, hoping to meet Lisa on the way because she could have taken the shortest route. Her father was afraid that Lisa might have had an accident, so he drove carefully, paying attention to the road but did not see his daughter. Finally, he went to the cafe but could not find Lisa. When he arrived at her workplace, he noticed that Lisa's scooter was parked in front of the building. At that moment, he panicked because he could not find his daughter despite having come all this way. When he saw her scooter, he immediately calmed down, thinking that maybe she was just late for work for some reason. However, there was no one in the cafe, and he noticed something else. Lisa's scooter key was still in the ignition, with a helmet dangling from the handle. These things made him believe that something was wrong with his daughter. She would never leave the key in the scooter while leaving it unattended in the parking lot. Meanwhile, Lisa's mother contacted the cafe owner, hoping to find clues about her daughter's whereabouts. However, the cafe owner claimed that he did not know where Lisa was. According to the cafe owner, Lisa had called the staff around 6 p.m. and they told her that they were closing the cafe. After the call from Lisa's mother, the cafe owner immediately got in his car and went to the cafe. On the way, the cafe owner also contacted 4 friends who lived nearby, asking them to help find Lisa. When the cafe owner arrived, they began searching both the cafe and the surrounding area. They hoped that Lisa might have decided to take the bus instead of the scooter. Lisa's mother and sister drove to the bus station in their town to check the schedule. Unfortunately, Lisa was not on the bus. Her family immediately contacted the police. It was dark. The police quickly expanded the search. The fact that Lisa's motorbike was left in the parking lot with the keys made them consider the possibility that Lisa had been kidnapped. Such incidents are quite rare in Sweden, especially in the remote rural area where she lived. Therefore, the police quickly mobilized teams with sniffer dogs, while other officers began knocking on doors near the cafe. When Lisa's classmates and friends learned about her missing, they shared information about the case on social media, hoping to attract more attention and find witnesses. The search went on all night but yielded no results. On Monday morning, the police department announced Lisa's missing to the public and asked anyone with information to come forward. At the same time, a man working in a warehouse across the street from the cafe found a motorcycle glove on the floor and reported it to the police. Detectives had checked the warehouse the night Lisa went missing but did not find the glove. They later showed the glove to Lisa's parents, who confirmed that it belonged to their daughter. This further strengthened the theory that Lisa had been kidnapped, and the police intensified their search efforts. By that time, news of Lisa's missing had captured the nation's attention, and hundreds of volunteers had joined the search. On Tuesday, the police received some alarming new leads. Volunteers searched the area around a dirt road a few hundred yards from the cafe. During the investigation of the crime scene, investigators collected several pieces of evidence related to Lisa, including a phone case, a receipt, a ticket, and a broken smartphone screen. They later found other parts of the smartphone, Lisa's ID card, and several other receipts scattered along the dirt road. This evidence made the police almost certain that Lisa had been kidnapped. They mobilized every available resource for the search, and the number of participants grew. The case became a major news topic in Sweden, and hundreds of volunteers from across the country joined the search. A local missing persons organization also joined the effort. The scale of the search for Lisa became the largest in the country's modern history, with more than 1,000 people involved in total. The police received numerous calls from people with information about Lisa's missing. One woman reported that before Lisa went missing, she had gone jogging. While she was jogging, a man standing next to his car stopped her and asked for directions to a city she had never heard of. He spoke to her in English. She tried to give him directions using Google Maps, but he asked her to get in his car and show him the way using his navigation device. The woman found this request suspicious, so she refused and continued walking. She also told the police that she believed she had seen the man among the workers repairing a warehouse across from the cafe. Lisa's co-workers shared a testimony with the police. On the day of her missing, a witness noticed two men standing across from the coffee shop, looking in the direction of where she worked. The witness didn't think much of it at the time, but after Lisa went missing, they decided to share it with the police. The next day, Wednesday, Lisa's father and some friends searched the dirt road where her belongings had been found the day before. When they went a little further, they found Lisa's driver's license and house keys. This suggested that Lisa may have been abducted and forced to leave the coffee shop via this road. Her kidnapper may have thrown her belongings out of the car or other vehicle they used to abduct her. Police and volunteers focused their efforts in this area, but no other items were found. That evening, a friend of Lisa's father was returning home from his search. As he passed the coffee shop, he noticed that the police had left the warehouse where Lisa's gloves were found. The man decided to go inside the coffee shop to look for any other clues. This time, he used his car's flashlight to walk around the premises since it was dark. While there, he noticed a shiny object lying on the floor. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a pair of women's earrings. The man later reported this to the police, who showed the earrings to Lisa's parents. They confirmed that the jewelry belonged to their daughter. The police then sealed off the shed and conducted a more thorough inspection. The lead detective explained that on the first day of the search for Lisa, the priority was to find her, so the shed had not been fully inspected, and they may have missed small items such as earrings. After conducting an in-depth investigation, forensic experts and sniffer dogs were called in. They discovered a remarkable piece of evidence hidden behind a wall, which was traces of human feces. Although it seemed unrelated to the case, forensic experts developed an hypothesis regarding it. When criminals commit serious and horrifying crimes, their bodies secrete a large amount of adrenaline, which can lead them to be unable to control their urge to urinate. This often happens to murderers, who frequently urinate before or during the crime. Based on the discovery of Lisa's gloves and earrings in the warehouse area, the police hypothesized that if she had been kidnapped, the perpetrator might have dragged her into this building. Therefore, detectives did not rule out the possibility that the kidnapper may have consumed a large amount of adrenaline, leading to an inability to control himself and necessitating urination at the scene. Consequently, fecal samples were taken and sent for DNA analysis. On Friday, the search area was expanded, and volunteers went to a farm about 3.2 kilometers from the cafe. This farm complex consisted of large buildings where many people worked. The search team decided to check the entire area. However, after they arrived, two men appeared at the farm. They spoke no Swedish and only communicated in English. One of them claimed that the police had come to the farm to check on them. But the leader of the search party did not believe him, as he thought he would be notified if it were true. So he decided to continue searching. The two men walked around the farm, observing for a while before driving away. After about an hour, the search team discovered a pile of branches behind the cowshed. Upon closer inspection, they found a motorcycle helmet, jacket, and headphones. Police quickly arrived on the scene and confirmed that these items belonged to Lisa. They then sent forensic experts to the farm to conduct a more thorough investigation. The detectives heard stories about two strange men who tried to stop volunteers from checking the farm. The police also recalled a report about a woman who had encountered a man acting suspiciously while jogging and who spoke English. In fact, they had some idea of his identity from the very beginning of the search. They visited the houses surrounding the cafe. In one of the houses, two Lithuanian brothers lived with the wife of one of them. All three of them spoke no Swedish and communicated only in English. They were the only people within a few miles who did not speak the local language. The police also had other indirect reasons to suspect them. The brothers worked at the warehouse across the street from the cafe and at the farm where Lisa's helmet was found. They were familiar with these locations and the road leading to their house. Since there were no other suspects, the police decided to question all three of them. Forensic experts, along with volunteers, went to the farm to continue the investigation. They noticed an old trailer, surrounded by tall grass, that looked like it hadn't been used in years. However, the grass around the door was flattened, indicating that something had been there recently. In addition, the grass under the door was also matted down, indicating that the door had not been opened for a long time. When the forensic experts opened the door, they were immediately hit by a strong stench of decay. Inside the trailer were several wardrobes, most of which had previously been used as changing rooms for workers. All but one were locked, leading experts to suspect that Lisa's body might be in one of them. They began opening each one and eventually discovered Lisa's body in an open cupboard, hidden behind a pile of old clothes and rags. Despite the small size of the cupboard, the perpetrator had managed to squeeze the victim inside. Lisa had been tied up with a rope around her neck and duct tape wrapped around her head. Her pants had been pulled down, and her shirt had been pulled up. Medical experts determined that Lisa had died from strangulation, but no signs of sexual assault were found. All of her clothes were turned over to the lab for testing. As news of the discovery of her body spread rapidly across the country, headlines in Sweden focused on Lisa's abduction. When her body was found and the public learned of her brutal murder, the incident shocked the entire nation. Since such crimes are extremely rare in Sweden, everyone was taken aback that someone could commit such a brutal act. On the same day her body was discovered, something unusual and quite strange happened. A YouTube user came across a video posted 13 days before the murder, titled 13, which had a countdown timer. The most disturbing detail was that the name of the channel that posted the video was Lisa. News of this video quickly spread across the media, leaving many people stunned by the coincidence. Some began to speculate that someone had predicted the murder, but the truth was much simpler. Someone had likely changed the channel name and video title after discovering Lisa's body. This could have been to suggest another conspiracy theory or just a cruel joke. The police are trying their best to quickly find the culprit in this murder. When Lisa's body was discovered, investigators brought in the owners of the farm, Nerijus Belavicius, his brother and his brother's wife for questioning. However, all of them denied any involvement in the case. They claimed that at the time of the kidnapping, they were at home together to provide each other with an alibi. According to their story, Nerijus was sleeping in his room while his wife was preparing dinner and Nerijus' brother was on the computer. Around 8 p.m., Nerijus woke up and went to the gas station to buy pizza and cigarettes. The police had some doubts about the testimony of them, as they might have been protecting each other. Although the police collected their DNA samples, investigators still did not find direct evidence linking them to the murder case. Forensic experts worked diligently at relevant locations, such as the barn and the farm, using all available resources and manpower, and their efforts finally paid off. In the barn area, there was a small room resembling an office, with a large window overlooking the cafe. When examining this room, experts discovered 15 different male semen stains on the wall and floor near the window. This suggested that someone had stood there, observing the cafe staff, including Lisa. The collected semen samples were promptly sent to the laboratory, where experts extracted DNA profiles from these samples. The results of the DNA analysis showed that all 15 semen traces matched the DNA of Narigis. Additionally, fecal samples found in the barn also matched his DNA. In the adjacent room, which had previously been used to store cow's milk, forensic experts found a pipe about 2 feet above the floor, covered in a thick layer of dust except for a small strip. The size of the strip matched the rope used to strangle Lisa. Blood was found on the pipe, and DNA analysis confirmed that the blood belonged to Narigis. On the floor near the pipe, they also found a piece of rope that matched the one on the pipe. Experts conducted tests and identified 2 DNA samples, Lisa's and Narigis's. This was an important step in the police investigation. They had connected the suspect to the rope used to kill the victim. Additionally, a strand of Lisa's hair was found in the room. Another crucial piece of evidence was Narigis's DNA found on her jacket. Based on this evidence, the police believed that Lisa had been murdered there. Police pieced together a similar sequence of events. Narigis had been observing the cafe for some time, and when Lisa was alone in the parking lot, he approached her. Based on the jogger's account, he may have pretended to ask Lisa for directions to a certain city or used some other tactic to trick her. Narigis may have then lured Lisa into his car to enter a route into the GPS system. Since Lisa was a kind person who always tried to help others, she may have agreed. Once she was in the car, the perpetrator covered her mouth and drove to a secluded place. At the scene, the perpetrator tied a rope around the victim's neck and hung her from a pipe. According to doctors, this action may have excited the perpetrator so much that he experienced an adrenaline rush, causing him to defecate on the spot. After the victim died, he placed Lisa's body in his car and drove to the farm, throwing her belongings out the window on the way. He hid the victim's body in the trailer's storage locker and covered it with old clothes. The entire process took less than an hour. Despite the overwhelming evidence, he maintained his innocence. His wife and brother were not involved and were released. They quickly left Sweden and returned to Lithuania. Preparations for the trial were intense. Narigis claimed that he had worked in that warehouse for a long time, so his DNA could have been present due to his work. Additionally, he had alibis from his wife and brother, although there were doubts about the reliability of both sources in court. This could work in his favor, although many uncertainties remained. However, the presence of Narigis's DNA on the victim's clothes could only be explained by his direct contact with her on the day of the murder. Furthermore, the police also found a witness who saw Narigis's car near the cafe just before and after Lisa's abduction. According to the witness, the car had traveled several times on the road between the cafe and the farm at a time when Narigis was believed to be asleep at home, according to his brother and his wife. After months of investigation, experts used the most advanced equipment to examine all the collected evidence. They found traces of Narigis's DNA on most of Lisa's clothing, including inside her underwear. With public interest piqued, the investigators continued to search for more clues that could influence the proceedings and strengthen Narigis's connection to the case. They traveled to Lithuania to speak with his wife and his brother again. The woman maintained that he had not left the house between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m., but when his brother was questioned, the detectives quickly obtained the information they wanted. After presenting the man with all the evidence against his brother and the details of what he had done to the 17-year-old girl, the man decided to cooperate with the police. He claimed that Narigis was not home that night, returning only around 7:30 p.m. He looked dirty and immediately washed all his clothes. As the police began questioning all the residents and visiting their homes, Narigis whispered to his brother to tell the police that he had been home during that time. Narigis later explained that he was afraid of being charged with a crime he did not commit, as he was an immigrant and had no alibi at the time of the abduction. The brother truly believed his cousin was innocent, but after hearing all the evidence, he realized that his initial thoughts might have been incorrect. Lisa's funeral took place just a month after her murder. The church where the funeral was held could only accommodate 130 people, but many more came to say goodbye to her. The organizers decided to set up extra chairs and screens outside so that everyone could watch the ceremony. The trial began 4 months after the murder and once again attracted national attention, placing everyone involved under a great deal of pressure. Narigis's lawyer claimed that his client's DNA could have been found on the victim's clothes because he had worked in the barn. However, the prosecutor argued that this explanation did not make sense, especially concerning Lisa's underwear. The only way the suspect's DNA could have ended up there would be if he had touched the victim's underwear. The lawyer was unable to produce any concrete evidence to prove his client's innocence. Instead, he theorized that the real killer was Narigis's brother. According to this theory, the brother took multiple samples of Narigis's DNA and deliberately left them on the victim's body and at the crime scene to confuse the case. But this defense was quickly dismissed. The trial lasted a month, and Narigis was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in a high-security prison. Although in Sweden, this prison offers the same amenities as a 3-star hotel. The lawyer appealed but was rejected. In early 2017, Narigis himself applied to be transferred to a prison in his home country of Lithuania for reasons that remain unclear. Lithuanian prisons are significantly worse than those in Sweden. Yet the court still accepted the defendant's request. After all, providing comfortable conditions of detention cost Swedish taxpayers hundreds of dollars per day per prisoner. That same year, Narigis appealed to the Lithuanian court, and his sentence was reduced from life to 15 years. However, his joy was short-lived. A few weeks later, the court overturned the decision, and Narigis was once again sentenced to life in prison, with no chance of returning to a comfortable cell in Sweden. 5 years later, in August 2022, Narigis was transferred to a prison in Lithuania. While other prisoners were being moved to another ward, one of them attacked and seriously injured Narigis, leading to his death on the way to the hospital. As for the suspect's wife, her involvement in the case has not been completely ruled out. The police stressed that it was almost impossible for her to be directly involved in the kidnapping or murder. If that were the case, experts would have found her DNA on the victim's clothes or belongings. However, it cannot be ruled out that she knew about Narigis's crime and tried to help him escape punishment by providing a false alibi. Narigis's brother also raised questions. Cafe employees reported seeing 2 men standing near the barn and watching them. Assuming that one of them was Narigis himself, the other man could have been his brother. However, the man's DNA was not found in the barn or on Lisa's clothes, making it unlikely that he was involved in the murder. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Candy Rogers. Candace Rogers, also known as Candy, was born on July 18, 1948, was either. After her birth, her parents divorced, but her father remained in the same city, allowing Candy to spend time with him regularly. As a child, she enjoyed the outdoors, often going for walks and playing with her dog. She also dreamed of joining the Campfire Girls, a girls-only organization similar to the Boy Scouts. In 1959, Candy joined the Campfire Girls at the age of 9. One of the organization's activities was selling mints door-to-door. On Friday, March 6th, she planned to sell mints after school. After returning home, having dinner, and playing with her dog. Then she took about 8 boxes of mints and headed out. Candy had planned to walk around her neighborhood and sell sweets to the people living nearby. To ensure that the other girls selling sweets in the area didn't overlap, each girl was assigned specific streets to visit. However, When Candy failed to return home by her expected time of 6 p.m., her mom started to worry. Candy's mom and grandfather set out to search for her, but they couldn't find her anywhere in the neighborhood. As darkness fell, the search party grew, with family, friends, and neighbors joining in to help. Despite their combined efforts, they were unable to find any sign of Candy. Convinced that something was wrong, Candy's mom decided to call the police. As the police joined the search, they began by questioning the neighbors. Their investigation revealed that she had only made one sale, suggesting that something may have happened to her soon after she left home. A witness reported seeing Candy on a nearby street around 6:30 p.m., which seemed unusual since her mother was already searching for her by then. Candy's grandfather reported some unusual incidents after going to search for his granddaughter. On the same street where a witness last saw Candy, he nearly got hit by a speeding green 1956 Ford. Although the police distributed the car's description, they were unable to locate it due to the lack of a license plate number. Later, at around 9 p.m., several mint boxes belonging to Candy were found along the road near a bridge, increasing the concern for her safety. The police intensified their search in this area, combing the riverbanks and a nearby wooded zone throughout the night. Unfortunately, Candy was not found. As news of Candy's disappearance spread, local newspapers covered the story, and it eventually gained statewide media attention. In 1959, child disappearances near their homes were extremely rare, making Candy's case even more disturbing. The residents of her town had not experienced a similar incident in many years, leaving them deeply shaken and concerned. The next morning, police increased their search by deploying more personnel and resources, including mounted police, off-road vehicles, and military members. A large number of volunteers from the city and surrounding areas joined the search, swelling the total number of search to over 1,000 people. This made it one of the largest searches in the country's history at the time. The search area was expanded to 11 miles around Candy's home, but despite this, no signs of her were found. Tragically, on the same day, a search helicopter clipped power lines and crashed, claiming the lives of 3 of its 5 crew members. Undeterred, the search efforts continued for many days, but yielded no results. Police officers worked tirelessly in multiple day and night to try and locate Candy. Investigators also followed up on approximately 750 tips received in the early days of the search, but unfortunately, every lead ended in a dead end. 15 days after Candy went missing, 2 military personnel on a hunting trip in the woods west of Spokane stumbled upon children's shoes on the ground. Recognizing the shoes as possibly belonging to Candy, they immediately reported their discovery to the police. The shoes were confirmed by Candy's grandfather. He said they were indeed hers. After discovering this clue, police conducted a search of the woods and they quickly found Candy's body, partially hidden in the underbrush and covered with pine branches. A medical examination revealed that the cause of death was strangulation, using a torn piece of fabric from Candy's own skirt. Injuries on Candy's hands and feet suggested that she had been tied up, although no ropes were found near. The police investigation showed that Candy had been sexually abused. During their search of the crime scene, the police discovered a green car seat cover nearby, although they were unable to establish if it was linked to the murder. A small, purple stain was also found on Candy's clothing, which gave off a strong scent of grape-flavored chewing gum. Despite all efforts, the police still could not find relevance between this stain and the case. With limited clues, police searched for any clues that might help them find the killer. They thoroughly investigated numerous tips and looked into the potential involvement of hundreds of people. This group included neighbors, people of interest, and previously convicted individuals. However, the investigation eventually narrowed down to focus on one particular suspect, Alfred Braves, a 50-year-old man. The reason Alfred became a suspect because, On the same day Candy's body was found, he died in his car, near where Candy's boxes of mints were found. Additionally, Alfred lived near Candy's home. Upon finding his body, police discovered a rope and a strand of hair that was not Alfred's, which belonged to a woman. Investigators obtained a search warrant for Alfred's home. Upon searching his house, they discovered numerous newspaper articles detailing sex crimes against women and girls. The police also found that several women had accused him of harassment, and even his own wife had suspicions about his involvement in Candy's murder. However, despite the suspicious circumstances, the police were unable to find any concrete evidence that directly linked Alfred to the crime. And investigators were hesitant to clear him of suspicion. In the face of a lack of evidence, detectives shifted their focus to other suspects. Over several months, the police diligently investigated each person, but every lead turned out to be a dead end. Later, investigators found another suspect, a serial killer named Hugh Morse. He was arrested in 1961 for a string of crimes. The important evidence that Hugh was involved in Candy's case was that he had a habit of chewing grape-flavored gum, which was similar to a substance found on Candy's clothes. Furthermore, additionally, he had committed 2 murders in Spokane a few months after Candy's death, further increasing the suspicion of his involvement in the crime. Hugh began committing crimes quite early. His first arrest was for assaulting a woman, but the penalty was lenient. He was merely discharged from the army. He then went on to commit multiple robberies in Los Angeles and served only a 6-month sentence. After being released, Hugh tricked 2 8-year-old girls into going with him to a secluded area by promising them ice cream. He then sexually assaulted them. This crime led to his arrest. However, instead of going to prison, a medical commission determined that he was a sexual psychopath. As a result, he was placed in a mental health facility for a period of 2 years to receive treatment. After his release, doctors thought Hugh had fully recovered. He then moved to Spokane, where he began peeping into women's windows. His actions took a more severe turn in November 1959, when he broke into the home of a 28-year-old woman and acted violently, ultimately killing her. 10 months later, Hugh entered the residence of a 69-year-old woman, repeating the same crimes as before. A month after that, he assaulted another woman, stabbing her multiple times. Although she sustained severe injuries, she managed to survive the attack. After escaping the city, he continued a devastating crime spree over several months, brutally attacking and sexually assaulting numerous women and girls with a knife, ultimately claiming the lives of 2 more victims. To evade capture, Hugh constantly moved from city to city and state to state, until the FBI intervened. He was eventually added to the list of the country's 10 most wanted fugitives, which ultimately led to his capture. Hugh received multiple life sentences, but his troubles didn't end there. He attempted to end his life in his cell. Fortunately, the guards intervened in time and saved him, allowing him to continue serving his sentence. Detectives in Candy's case visited Hugh in prison multiple times, trying to gather information about the case. Despite repeatedly denying any involvement, he took a polygraph test to prove his innocence. The test results suggested he was telling the truth, but these results are considered unreliable and therefore cannot be used as evidence in court. At the time of the murder, Hugh lived in Spokane, and furthermore, he had a criminal record of similar incidents that made investigators suspicious. They initially considered him the primary suspect due to he familiar with this neighborhood. But he consistently denied any involvement. Although they suspected him, they did not have enough evidence to conclude his involvement in the crime. The police then shifted their attention to another suspect, 49-year-old Howard Barnett. He was arrested in February 1960 for allegedly molesting a minor girl. Shortly after his arrest, he ended his life right in his cell at the Spokane police station. Hugh wrote a cryptic message in his own blood on the wall before his death. stating, "He have a sin before the Lord." However, it wasn't until after he passed away that his wife became aware of his arrest. She then asked the police if they thought Hugh might have been involved in Candy's death. Despite several investigations, no concrete evidence was found to connect He to the crime. The police continued to pursue new leads over the years, looking into other possible suspects. A woman came forward with information, stating that on the day of Candy's disappearance, she saw a green car following her. Police reopened the case multiple times but were unable to gather evidence linking the green car or any other. The case was reopened periodically over the years but always hit a dead end. The investigation into Candy's murder was complicated by numerous false confessions. 13 individuals came forward claiming to be the killer, but when questioned by the police, they couldn't provide any details that only the real killer would know. Instead, they simply repeated details they had read in the newspapers. The police department changed personnel a lot during the investigation. However, none were able to solve the case, allowing Candy's murder to remain one of the state's most notorious and baffling crimes. The crime had a profound impact on the local community, leading many parents to reevaluate their perception of safety and ultimately changing the way they supervised their children's outdoor activities. In the early 2000s, the case was reopened, and a new detective used modern technologies to help with the investigation. Fortunately, the police had collected and preserved crucial evidence in 1959, which allowed experts to take another look. By using modern DNA analysis, they were able to identify a male semen sample on the Candy's clothing. Further analysis of the DNA sample was done to create a profile, which was then entered into the FBI database, but yielded no matches. Investigators also compared the DNA to samples from multiple suspects, but none of them matched. For many years, people suspected Hugh Morse of committing the crime, but forensic evidence revealed no link between him and the murder. As a result, the investigation stalled once again. Although the police had a DNA sample from the perpetrator who sexually assaulted and killed Candy, identifying the individual continued to elude them. In 2021, authorities reopened the case, and a new detective chose to use genetic genealogy, a cutting-edge DNA analysis method, had already solved numerous cold cases. By applying this innovative approach, the detective hoped that the case will be solved. The detective reached out to several labs that specialized in the analysis he needed, but they all shared the same frustrating news. They concluded the sample had deteriorated too much, making it impossible to extract the necessary information. Undeterred, the detective contacted one final lab, and it has provided new clues that are helpful to the investigation. Armed with state-of-the-art tools, the experts were able to analyze the sample successfully and generate a DNA profile of the perpetrator. This profile was then uploaded to genealogical databases, allowing investigators to begin searching for the DNA owner's relatives. After carefully examining thousands of individuals, then they narrowed down their focus to one specific family. Upon investigating this family, the investigators discovered that the DNA sample likely came from one of three brothers, but all three brothers had passed away. However, one of the brothers had a living daughter. The police reached out to her about the possibility that her father might have been involved in the murder. Despite her initial shock, she agreed to cooperate with the investigation. The woman provided a DNA sample, which was compared to the semen found on Candy's clothing. The results confirmed that she was closely related to culprit, who left the DNA evidence on Candy's clothing. Based on this new information, the police obtained a court order to exhume the woman's father's grave. DNA experts extracted a DNA profile from his remains and compared it to semen found on Candy's clothing. After a 62-year wait, the results revealed a definitive match between the DNA from the woman's father and the semen found on Candy's clothing. This confirmed that the perpetrator was a man named John Ryhoff. John Ryhoff was not initially identified as a suspect following Candy's murder. However, detectives later investigated his biography and found links to other crimes. At the time of the murder, John was 20 years old and lived within a mile of Candy's house. He was also stationed at an army base near where her body was discovered. 2 years after the murder, John committed another crime when he attacked a woman, binding and sexually assaulting her, then attempting to kill her. The woman managed to survive the attack. As a result of the assault, John was arrested and sentenced to 6 months in prison. He also received a dishonorable discharge from the army. Upon his release from prison, John started a family and has 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. He kept a low profile and appeared to be living an ordinary life, working multiple jobs. One of these jobs was at a food packaging plant, where he suffered a severe chemical burn to his face and leaving a scar. John finally ended his life in June 1970, at the age of 31, leaving no note or explanation. The authorities determined that the victim, Candy, may have known her killer, John. Candy's friend, who was 10 years old at the time of the murder, was revealed to be the killer's sister. Years later, she recalled how she cried in her brother's, John's arms after learning about Candy's death. Unaware that he was the person responsible. Sadly, Candy's parents did not live to see their daughter's case solved. Candy's mother passed away in 2006, and her father died life in 1963, for years after Candy's murder, likely due to his inability to cope with his loss. After 62 years, the case was finally solved, marking one of the longest investigations in history. The investigation involved multiple detectives from different generations. At the press conference announcing the killer's identity, only one officer who worked on the case in 1959 was present. He expressed gratitude for having lived long enough to see the case resolved and to finally know the truth. The daughter of the killer, John Hoff, initially struggled to accept that her father committed such a heinous crime. However, she eventually came to terms with the fact, describing her father as a monster who took an innocent girl's life. She has expressed regret that her father was not held accountable for his actions during his lifetime. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Gabby Doolin. Gabby Doolin was born on December 26, 2007, in Scottsville, Kentucky, a small town with a population of just over 4,000. In Scottsville, most people know each other or know someone in every family. Like many small towns, here there are very few types of entertainment. Locals primarily focused on school sports, especially football. The local school had good fields for football, baseball, and tennis, where they frequently held games and competitions. Participating in these activities has become a tradition for locals, especially when their children participate. Gabby's family was typical. Her parents had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. The oldest son was a member of the school football team, while Gabby participated in cheerleading. In November 2015, when Gabby was 7 years old, their town was preparing for the biggest football game of the year. Their school team was about to compete against a team from another county. And everyone was excited for this contest. Although Gabby's older brother played on the team, but she liked playing with other children more than playing games. Gabby's parents originally intended to leave her at home with their youngest son, cared for by a relative. However, Gabby convinced them to let her join them. On the evening of November 14th, they went to the school field for a game. In addition to local people, many people from a neighboring county came to support their team. Once they arrived at the stadium, Gabby saw her friends and asked her mom if she could play with them. Her mom agreed but reminded her to stay on school grounds and stick with the other kids. After that, her mom went to the bleachers, while she ran off to meet her friends. Gabby ran back and forth to her mom a few times. After that, she ran away to play again. At one point, she visited her dad, who was in the announcement room, and asked him for some money to buy snacks at the concession stand, then she running off again. Minutes later, Gabby's friends approached her mom in the bleachers, looking worried. Her mom noticed Gabby was not with them and asked what was wrong. The girls explained they had decided to play hide and seek, and Gabby was to find them. They had hidden in the restroom, but time passed, and Gabby never found them. Thinking they had won, the girls left their hiding spot to find Gabby, but she was nowhere to be seen. They called her name and checked all the places they had been playing earlier, but Gabby had seemingly disappeared. They then remembered that Gabby might have gone to the bleachers to find her mom, so they rushed there. Gabby's mother panicked when she discovered her daughter was missing and quickly informed her husband. He hurried off to search the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, the mother headed to the concession stand, where Gabby had wanted to buy snacks, to continue her search. While searching, the parents' Gabby's encountered friends and shared the news about their daughter's disappearance. Concerned, their friends joined in a search for Gabby. They thoroughly searched the area around the stadium but found no trace of Gabby. Returning to the stadium, the parents' Gabby's made an announcement over the loudspeakers in hopes that she would hear it, but there was still no sign of her. As the game paused and spectators returned to their seats, they continued to ask people if they had seen Gabby, and some offered to help search as well. They went out again to search the area around the stadium and asked the staff to turn on flashlights around the baseball field, which led to a small forest. They walked through the forest but still couldn't find Gabby. By this time, about 20 minutes had passed since she disappeared, and the parents decided to call the police. Officers quickly arrived at the scene, listened to the accounts from the parents and Gabby's friends, and they began their search. The local police department had little experience with serious cases like this, as child disappearances were rare in their small town. The officers immediately considered the worst-case scenario, that Gabby may have been abducted or harmed. The officers encountered a pressing issue: the suspected kidnapper was likely at the stadium, where a game was about to conclude. Realizing they had limited time before fans started leaving, which may include suspects, they decided to stop the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside. Police kept watch at all exits to stop anyone from fleeing. They decided not to inform people about the situation, to avoid causing panic, so as not to hinder their search. If people became aware that a kidnapper of a 7-year-old girl might be nearby, it could lead to chaos. Meanwhile, state police arrived at the school and began searching the surrounding area. They moved toward the baseball field and entered the woods. Deeper into the trees, they discovered a small creek where they found the body of a girl, later identified as Gabby. They called for an ambulance to transport her body to the medical examiner. A preliminary examination indicated asphyxiation due to visible marks on her neck. Furthermore, part of Gabby's clothes were also missing, making the police suspect that she had been sexually assaulted. Gabby's mother saw an ambulance near the woods and immediately thought that her daughter had been found in need of medical attention. She rushed to the scene, but was stopped by the police, who didn't want her to witness the disturbing scene they were dealing with. The police investigation had quickly turned into a murder case, so they decided to relocate everyone from the stadium to the school gym. The investigators suspected that the killer might be among the group, and they needed to identify the perpetrator as soon as possible. The investigators then informed Gabby's parents about the likely circumstances of her death. They inquired if the parents had any suspicions about the person responsible for this heinous act. Specifically, they inquired if anyone had made threats against the family or if the parents had noticed anything unusual. However, Gabby's parents stated they had no idea who could be behind this act. Then, detectives interviewing Gabby's friends to see if they had noticed anything unusual that evening. They asked if anyone had been following or watching them, but the girls didn't remember anything suspicious. Detectives also brought Gabby's friends to the gym and asked them to carefully observe the people present, hoping to trigger their memory. Unfortunately, this effort did not yield any significant leads. The lead detective persisted in his belief that Gabby's friends may have unknowingly seen the kidnapper. He suspected that they might have been hesitant to point him out due to fear. To aid their recall, he encouraged them to remember every detail from that evening. Eventually, one of Gabby's friends mentioned that when she hid from Gabby in the restroom, she saw a man near the door. Although the girl's memory of the man's appearance was limited, she recalled that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police spoke to the ticket vendor, who confirmed seeing a man with a denim jacket draped. The vendor found this person's behavior unusual and suspected he was intoxicated. Although this new information helped, the police still couldn't identify the man. The police started questioning the people who had been at the game. As they did, it became clear why they were all being held there. They grew concerned, particularly for the safety of their children. Despite their fear, they cooperated with the police and answered their questions. To further investigate, the police cross-referenced the names of men present in the gym against a sex offenders registry, but found no matches. They also checked on sex offenders who had lived near the school, verifying their whereabouts at the time of the incident, but all of them had alibis. None of them had been near the school at the time of the incident. Several witnesses reported that they saw a man named Timothy Madden, he acting strangely near the women's restroom during the game. As a local resident, many people were familiar with him, but they stated that his behavior that evening seemed suspicious. According to these witnesses, Madden was wearing a denim jacket, which matches the description provided by one of Gabby's friends who also saw a man near the restroom. A witness who was a distant relative of Timothy reported that during the game, Timothy seemed distracted. Despite his younger son playing on the field, Timothy, who normally showed great interest in his son's sports activities, wasn't paying attention. Several other witnesses also expressed concerns about Timothy's unusual behavior, leading investigators to interrogation him. As night fell, many people had been released from the school. Before speaking with Timothy, investigators sought the local sheriff's opinion. The sheriff, who had known Timothy, doubted he was capable of committing such a crime. Timothy lived with his wife and 5 children. When police went to speak with him, they knocked on his door, and he answered. The officers asked if he knew the reason for their visit, and Timothy stated he was aware of Gabby's murder, but had no involvement in it. The detectives then used a tactic to gather more information. They asked Timothy if he could explain why several eyewitnesses claimed to have recorded him talking to Gabby shortly before her murder, through videos they supposedly provided. However, the detectives had fabricated this information. Their intention was to provoke Timothy into revealing his guilt or new information if he was involved in the crime. Timothy initially claimed he had no knowledge of the events, but he quickly changed his story. He admitted to speaking to Gabby near the stadium that evening. According to Timothy, he had stepped outside to smoke when several girls ran by him. Shortly after, Gabby approached and asked if he had seen her friends, explaining they were playing hide-and-seek and she couldn't find them. Timothy directed her towards their location, and she ran off. The detectives found Timothy's rapid change in story suspicious. Furthermore, his account indicated that he had spoken to Gabby just minutes before her disappearance. Notably, at the time when they met near the stadium, there were no witnesses present, which could have provided Timothy with an opportunity to commit the crime. The detectives then inquired if Timothy could provide a reasonable explanation if his DNA was found on Gabby's body. He replied calmly that he had none. They also requested a DNA sample from Timothy and the clothing he wore at the stadium. Timothy agreed to both requests. However, when handing over his clothing to the police, they discovered suspicious stains on the pants, denim jacket, and underwear that resembled blood. When questioned about the stains, Timothy insisted they were just dirt and denied any wrongdoing. However, The police were skeptical and decided to wait for the DNA analysis results to proceed with an arrest. After several days, the forensic pathologist completed the examination of the victim's body, confirming that Gabby's cause of death was manual strangulation. The pathologist also determined that she had been brutally assaulted. A biological sample of the perpetrator was extracted and sent to the laboratory for further analysis. The day after the murder, something unexpected happened. An anonymous letter arrived at the police station, claiming a suspicious person had been seen at the game. The letter provided a detailed description of the person's car, including the make and license plate number. This allowed investigators to quickly track down the vehicle's owner, who was a student living about 30 minutes from Scottsville. When questioned by the police, the student denied attending the game and knowing about the murder. He claimed to have been at work that evening, and the police were able to verify his alibi. As a result, he was removed from the list of suspects. Despite this, the person who wrote the anonymous letter was never identified. It is unclear whether the letter was intended as a trap or a cruel joke, but it is clear that the student was innocent. Police quickly received additional clues. Several people reported suspicious behavior by a 16-year-old local boy. He had given conflicting accounts of his whereabouts on the day of the game, claiming both to have been there and not to have attended. He also mentioned seeing girls playing hide and seek. The detectives discovered that the boy was Timothy Madden's son. However, what they found even more alarming was that the boy had threatened his father with a knife just 2 weeks before the murder. The police wanted to question the boy further but needed his parents to be present. However, his mother refused to cooperate and wouldn't provide a DNA sample, leaving the police without any concrete evidence. As news of the police investigation into the Timothy family spread, rumors began circulating in the small town of Scottsville. Some speculated that one of Timothy's older sons could be a suspect, while others suspected Timothy himself. Gabby's parents were shocked to hear these rumors, especially since they had known Timothy Madden since childhood and were close to his family. Their children played on the same sports teams, and they would often sit together at games. Given their long-standing friendship, Gabby's parents found it difficult to imagine that anyone from their social circle could be connected to the murder. Following the spread of rumors in town, another incident occurred. The 20-year-old eldest son of the Timothy family began sending text messages to the police. He using profanity and issuing threats, insisting police stop bothering his family. He then was promptly arrested for making these threats. Further investigation revealed that there was an outstanding arrest warrant for him in another town, related to allegations of assaulting a minor. During questioning, the young man attributed his behavior to frustration over the accusations against his family. He denied any involvement in the murder, claiming he was at his cousin's house in a neighboring town on the evening in question. He consented to providing a DNA sample, which was then sent to the lab for analysis. On November 20th, 6 days after Gabby's murder, her funeral was held, drawing hundreds of mourners from Scottsville and surrounding towns. Everyone came together to support Gabby's parents, donating to help cover the funeral expenses. Meanwhile, the lab finished analyzing the DNA evidence, comparing it to samples from Timothy and his son. The results were conclusive. The semen on Gabby's body matched Timothy Madden's DNA, and the blood on his clothes matched Gabby's DNA. Detectives attended the funeral and discreetly informed Gabby's parents about this. At the same time, police officers arrived at Timothy's house and took him into custody. However, Timothy still maintains that he is innocent. He said the blood on his clothes was his own, the result of a scratch from a fence. This contradicted his initial testimony to police, in which he had claimed the stain was mud. With the DNA evidence in hand, the prosecution took the case to court, seeking the death penalty. During trial preparation, Timothy's lawyer maintained his client's innocence. He raised concerns about the reliability of the evidence, citing inconsistencies in the timeline. Specifically, the lawyer argued that Timothy was at the stadium filming a game at the time of the murder. However, Timothy himself had previously told police that he saw Gabby around the same time. The lawyer highlighted that Gabby's body was discovered in a creek, yet when Timothy returned to the stadium, his clothes were dry. Additionally, Timothy's mother, who resided with him, reported that when Timothy came home, he was wearing clean clothes, didn't look troubled, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution argued that the discovery of Timothy's semen on Gabby's body made all of the defense's arguments meaningless. This evidence firmly established that Timothy was involved in the case. According to police, his account of that evening contained some truth. It is possible that Timothy did leave the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby, who was searching for her friends. Given that Timothy was the father of one of Gabby's friends, she would have been familiar with him. Gabby may have approached Timothy to ask about the whereabouts of the other girls. At this point, Timothy might have concocted a plan, telling Gabby that the girls had gone into the woods behind the baseball field and offered to take her there. Once they were far enough from the school, he could have assaulted and killed her, then go back to the match. The wait for Timothy's trial had been ongoing for 4 years, causing distress for Gabby's family. They were anxious for justice to be served and for the person responsible for the murder to be held accountable. However, the case was slowed down due to many administrative procedures, leaving the family frustrated and having to wait for many years. In 2019, the prosecution and defense started negotiating a plea deal. The prosecution proposed waiving the death penalty if Timothy pleaded guilty and accepted a life sentence. Gabby's parents supported this proposal, as the prolonged wait for the trial was taking a toll on them. They also wanted to avoid the emotional pain of attending multiple hearings. Although Timothy had consistently maintained his innocence, he eventually agreed to the plea deal and confessed. However, the terms of the agreement did not require him to disclose the details of his actions, he only had to admit his guilt. This was unsatisfactory for Gabby's family, as they wanted the perpetrator to take full responsibility for his crimes and provide a complete account of what happened to their daughter. The court hearing became heated, Gabby's father yelling at Timothy and Timothy's relatives shouting at Gabby's family. The judge was forced to intervene, calling a break and separating the parties. Ultimately, Timothy was sentenced to life in a maximum security prison. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of April Jones. April Jones was born on April 4, 2007. April is a cheerful child, but she also has her own problems. Born 7 weeks early, she had some early health issues, but with medical support, she grew into a typical young girl. However, April was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, a condition caused by a brain injury, often due to a lack of oxygen at or shortly after birth. Cerebral palsy affected her lower body. Although her condition was not very severe, it caused her pain and made basic muscle movements difficult. Despite having a mild condition, she required special care. On October 1, 2012, at around 7 o'clock in the evening, 5 years old, April was playing outside with her friend at the Bryn Aeg housing estate in West Wales. Usually, April's parents don't let her go out to play when it's dark like that, but because she had received an excellent report card the day before, they allowed her extra playtime. April was supposed to return home after playing outside with her friend for about 20 minutes, but after that she did not return home. Her parents had last seen her on a bike, so they went out to look for her. They found April's 7-year-old friend nearby, but April wasn't with her. The friend explained that April had gotten into a car. Fortunately, she could describe the man who took April. He was wearing a green jacket, had blue or green eyes, brown hair, and a beard. Despite being young, the friend provided a crucial detail: she saw April get into the car on the driver's side. In the UK, the steering wheel is on the right side, which suggests the man was driving a left-hand drive car. Despite it being nighttime, but the police responded swiftly. The first officers reached the scene the 999 call. While search teams were being assembled, authorities interviewed people who knew April to determine if anything unusual had occurred that day or in the days before her disappearance. April's family couldn't think of anything that could help the police. April had gone to her swimming class earlier that day, and after returning home, she was allowed to play outside with her friends. It had only been a short while since April went out, but it was getting late in the autumn, so it would get dark soon, making it very difficult to find her. News of April's disappearance spread quickly throughout the neighborhood, through word of mouth and social networks. Within hours, locals left their homes to help search her. Although their intentions were good, this outpouring of support hindered the police investigation. The police were grateful for everyone's enthusiasm, but they still needed to conduct door-to-door inquiries to see if anyone had seen April or seen the person who might have taken her. The problem was that very few people were at home because most had gone out to assist with the search. The story of April's disappearance quickly drew national attention. Television crews and reporters from all over the country flocked to the small town to cover the incident. At 10:30, the police provided a status update to the public and media, voicing concern as they still hadn't found any leads related to April. They appealed to anyone with information to come forward right away. On the evening of October 1st, authorities released more details about April's disappearance. At the time she went missing, April was wearing her school polo shirt and a purple coat. Over 100 people had joined the search to support the police. The local community played a crucial role in the search, as their knowledge of the area invaluable. In addition to locals, a large number of volunteers from England traveled to Wales to assist, and several people from South Wales also joined the search. The search was difficult due to the town's surroundings, which included mountains, waterfalls, gorges, dense forests, and uneven terrain, all of which were exacerbated by the cold, rainy, and overcast autumn evening. The police divided the volunteers into multiple search teams, which then combed through a vast area of about 60 square kilometers. After 8 hours of searching the difficult Welsh terrain, by 3:30 a.m., the volunteers had thoroughly covered the area. Although the situation was desperate, there was a poignant beauty in the fact that many people were willing to give their time to help find little April. This outpouring of support must have brought some comfort to her family, who waited anxiously by the phone for news. However, the police had prohibited the family from joining the search, fear that they might encounter terrible things about their daughter. On October 2, 2012, April was still missing despite extensive nighttime searches. In response, the police in Wales issued a child rescue notice, a nationwide alert that disseminated April's description and that of her abductor to all UK police agencies. This was the first time the child rescue alarm had been sounded nationwide. 14 hours after April's disappearance, the media began pressuring the police to release every detail of their investigation. The police faced criticism for their handling of the case. But it can be argued that this was unfair. They had responded swiftly, organizing search parties and searching for April throughout the night, doing everything possible given the challenging weather. Detective Superintendent Andy John led the investigation, keeping the public and media informed with regular updates. To aid the search, he established roadblocks where officers stopped and inspected every vehicle. Posters with April's photo were also distributed, aiming to spark anyone's memory that might help locate her. People living nearby and those from farther away had been sending reports to the police. Many of these reports mentioned the same name, Mark Bridger. Several locals identified Mark as matching describe April's kidnapper. He was known as a Land Rover driver with blue eyes and short facial hair, and notably, his car had a left-hand drive. Witnesses reported seeing Mark or his car near where April went missing. They found the last known address of Mark and multiple attempts to contact him. However, both Mark and April were not present at the address. Mark has never encountered any legal problems before. However, some local residents reported that he had participated in the initial nighttime search for April. Due to the large number of volunteers, it was not possible to verify this information. The authorities shifted their focus to locating Mark. They deployed helicopters to scour the area from above while officers searched all locations on the ground. They discovered that Mark had recently moved into a cottage called Mount Pleasant. When police arrived, they found no one living there and there were no cars there. They entered the cottage and called out April's name, but there was no response. It was initially unclear whether Mark had been evading authorities. At 4:30, police announced that Mark had been captured. Before, a police aircraft spotted him walking his dog on a country road near April's family home. He appeared to have altered his appearance by shaving his head and beard. Police helicopters led patrol cars to Mark's location. When stopped by officers, he provided his name without attempting to hide his identity. The officer then inquired about April's whereabouts, to which he responded that it was an accident, claiming he had unintentionally crushed her with his car and was now unaware of her location. During the arrest, Mark became visibly emotional. The arresting officers informed him of his rights, stating, "You do not have to say anything, but anything you say may be used as evidence." Strangely enough, Mark was eager to talk, even though he didn't have to. The officers reminded him that he was free to speak or not. Mark told them he had been searching for April on foot day and night. His car, a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery, was in the garage. He denied abducting her and said he tried to revive her but panicked. He only learned her name that morning from the news. He wished he could remember where he left her, saying she was lifeless on the seat. He apologized to April's family. Meanwhile, in April's hometown, a large-scale search operation was underway. Police, canine teams, volunteers, and mountain rescuers scoured the Welsh countryside, but couldn't find her. Volunteers numbering in the hundreds from all over the country worked relentlessly, usually only sleep for a few hours, then continue searching. The police received over 600 offers of help, with many suggesting areas to search. Thanks to local expertise, over 20 areas were thoroughly checked. At this stage, detectives had Mark Bridger in custody and were interrogating him. Mark immediately began discussing the incidents of that day. He stated that he had no knowledge of April's whereabouts and described his activities, which included attending a parent-teacher conference at his daughter's school and then parking near his girlfriend's house, also which is close to April's parents' house. Mark admitted to consuming a few drinks and seeing two girls riding their bicycles. He remembered the dark-haired girl riding behind his car, and claimed that when he looked for the other girl, she was nowhere to be seen, but then suddenly her bike appeared. Mark admitted that he had been nearby at the time of the incident and April was hit by his car while she was riding her bike. He claimed he was drunk at the time. He stated that he didn't intend to harm April, but knew he had made a mistake. He said he took her into his car to rush her to the hospital. Mark described April's condition, said her face had turned pale, and her lips were purple. He acknowledged that his actions led to her death and mentioned that he knew her parents. However, after this admission, Mark's memory became unclear. Despite initially being open about his involvement, but he couldn't recall what he did with April's body after she died. Even though the police tried to interrogate Mark many times, but they were hindered when he suddenly claimed to have amnesia. He repeatedly stated that he was in his house, couldn't find April, and wouldn't have abandoned her. Initially, Mark was cooperative and honest with the police, but they began to doubt his sincerity when he claimed memory loss at the exact moment April went missing and suspected that he might be withholding information. The police decided to tread carefully, they aware that using an aggressive tone during questioning might lead Mark to refuse further cooperation. The police obtained a statement from April's 7-year-old friend, claiming that April voluntarily got into Mark's car, appeared happy, and was smiling. It is unlikely that someone would deceive a child in this way without reason or motive. However, the police also had a witness who contradicted this account. The witness reported that April entered the Land Rover through the driver's door, which is actually the left-hand side door in the UK. This contradicts Mark's story, suggesting that his testimony may be fabricated. When confronted with this new information, Mark became uncomfortable. Despite this, he maintained his original story and showed no signs of wavering under various lines of questioning. Detectives employed a novel approach by consulting Dr. Joe Sullivan, a renowned expert in criminal body language and behavior. Dr. Sullivan's involvement went beyond analyzing Mark's interviews. He also visited his home to gather information for a psychological profile. What he found was astounding. Mark's home contained an assortment of disturbing items, including knives, handcuffs, and a shotgun, some of which were concealed, while others were openly displayed. Furthermore, he worked at a slaughterhouse. According to Dr. Sullivan's assessment, Mark was a fantasist who identified himself with fictional characters like Rambo, indicating a disconnection from reality. Despite Dr. Sullivan's advice, the police took a paternalistic approach with Mark. However, he stuck to his story. The police then relied on forensic specialists to thoroughly search his house for evidence. The search team found small specks of blood in the restroom, but at that point, it was unclear whose blood it was. It was possible that the blood came from he cutting himself while shaving. The police sent the samples to the laboratory, but it would take up to 24 hours to get the results. Dr. Sullivan warned the police that Mark was unlikely to feel empathy or guilt about his actions. Although he might try to pretend otherwise, but Dr. Sullivan believed that he lacked these emotions. As a result, Dr. Sullivan advised the police that appealing to his better nature would be pointless, as he didn't have one. The police cannot expect Mark to be remorseful, sympathetic, or confess his guilt. The police took Dr. Sullivan's advice seriously and re-detained Mark on suspicion of murder. This sudden turn caught Bridger off guard, and him pale. Furthermore, explicit child photos were discovered on his laptop, leading to his second arrest for possessing offensive images of children. As the investigation intensified, Mark suspected the police had more information than they were letting on. Meanwhile, April's parents were informed on Thursday, 3 days after her disappearance, that the police had shifted their focus from finding her alive to investigating a murder case. They had to break the devastating news to their children that they had lost a sister. Receiving news that their daughter was presumed dead, but her body hasn't been found yet, was a difficult pill to swallow. The police kept this information from Mark, but they also advised the volunteers who had been tirelessly searching for April to stand down and let the experts handle the situation. However, this suggestion was met with resistance from the hundreds of volunteers, many of whom were in tears as they left the site. On Friday, 4 days after April vanished, police search teams continued their search for clues. There was no evidence that Mark killed April, according to forensic experts. A thorough examination of his Land Rover revealed no marks, no blood, no hair, and no skin. This was despite Mark's claim that there should have been signs of April's injuries, such as scratches on the bumper or blood or hair inside the car. He tried to explain by saying he didn't see any blood on April after his car hit her. Although April was run over, she didn't appear to have any open wounds. However, Mark's story was about to be exposed as a fabrication. On Friday night at 6:15 p.m., the lab contacted the detectives. The results of the DNA comparison between April's toothbrush and the blood spatters found in Mark's restroom. They matched. Additionally, DNA evidence was found on his fleece collar and jogging bottoms. After gathering enough evidence, the police charged April. They found photos on his laptop, which they showed him during questioning. The photos depicted minors being sexualized, exploited, and manipulated. However, Mark denied any wrongdoing, claiming he didn't enjoy things, despite being shown the images and asked to describe them. The photos were disturbing and something no reasonable person would have. Mark also denied searching for explicit websites for personal gratification, even when confronted with his internet search history. After 3.5 days in custody, the police's 96-hour questioning period was almost over. They made one last attempt to get Mark to tell the truth. The decision to press charges now rested with the Crown Prosecution Service. The police questioned Mark about April's whereabouts and whether he intended to murder her. They pointed out that no blood was found on the bathroom walls at his house, yet a full DNA profile of April was discovered. Mark claimed that if he had blood on his hands and didn't dry them, he might have accidentally flicked blood onto the walls. However, this contradicted his previous statement that he hadn't experienced any issues with blood for a week prior. Despite the inconsistencies, Mark stuck to his story, stating that some blood must have been present, even though he had previously claimed there was no blood on him or April, or in the car. Mark was subjected to intense police questioning regarding the images found on his laptop. The police were struggling to find ways to get him to reveal the truth. When asked if he was using the photographs for self-gratification, he denied it. However, he did suggest that a buildup of sexual frustration might have contributed to his actions on the morning in question. Mark's composure eventually began to crack under the pressure of questioning. He became agitated, raised his voice, and started using profanity. It was clear that he took issue with being labeled a pedophile. After a lengthy and challenging process, the police were finally able to uncover Mark's true nature. They were convinced they had the right person and had already submitted the case to the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS. The CPS subsequently authorized the police to charge Mark with the abduction and murder of April Jones. When informed of the charges, Mark showed no emotion or remorse. As he arrived at court in a prison van, everyone threw objects and shouted obscenities at him. Over the next 2 weeks, forensic investigators found more and more blood traces from April at Mark's house. The fireplace also contained several broken bones, but they were so badly decomposed that it was impossible to confirm if they belonged to April. On May 30, 2013, a jury convicted 47-year-old Mark Bridger of kidnapping and murdering April Jones. Judge Mr. Justice Griffith Williams described Mark as a chronic liar and a pedophile who had long harbored fantasies about young girls. However, the judge believed that he was not specifically targeting April, but rather was pursuing a young girl in general. Unfortunately, April became the poor victim of Mark's actions. Mr. Justice Griffith Williams immediately sentenced Mark Bridger to life in prison, with the details of his sentence to remain undisclosed to the public. Mark claimed that April's death was a tragic accident, resulting from his car hitting her. However, his credibility had been lost long before his trial, in the eyes of both law enforcement and the judicial system. Given the overwhelming evidence against him, Mark was unable to escape justice. April was a young girl who was playing outside with her friend, then she was targeted by an individual with a twisted mind. April's family was relieved that Mark would spend the rest of his life in prison, unable to harm any more children, despite their overwhelming grief. However, April's remains were never found after the trial. While 17 bone fragments were discovered in Mark's house, but it was impossible to point out that they belonged to April. April's passing has left an unfillable void in the hearts of her loved ones. It is hoped that her family and friends can find some way to rebuild their lives. A funeral service for April was held in her hometown on April 26, 2013. May April Jones rest in peace. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Inman family. William Inman and Sandra's story began in 1983 when they met at church. He was 18 and she was 16. With their parents' approval, they quickly got married and moved to Logan, Ohio. William was a devoted religious man who worked as a builder. In his free time, he volunteered at the Evangelical Church of the Tabernacle of Faith near Nelsonville, where he played musical instruments. Meanwhile, Sandra, as a housewife, supported her husband's spiritual activities. In 1984, the couple had their first child, a son named William Jr. To prevent any confusion, the church community referred to the father as Bill and the son as Will. Over the years, Will grew up. In 2001, at the age of 17, he met 15-year-old Summer Cook at a church service. Their meeting was strikingly similar to the love story of Bill and Sandra. The young couple dated for 3 years, and in 2004, after Summer turned 18, they got married. They quickly settled into Will's parents' large house in Logan. In the same year, 39-year-old Bill Inman declared himself a spiritual leader and turned his garage into a temporary church, where he started holding services. Although local residents were initially skeptical of him as a self-proclaimed pastor, his church began to gather followers. It started with neighbors and gradually expanded to their acquaintances. People were drawn there to pray, seek comfort, and make donations. In 2005, Will and Summer joyfully welcomed a son named Alex. However, they soon encountered financial challenges. Will's work at the church did not provide enough income, so the family chose to seek better opportunities in another state. In 2006, the Inman family relocated to Florida. They soon found jobs in the construction industry, building hotels in their new location. Meanwhile, Sandra and Summer looked after their home and raised little Alex. After 2 years, however, they missed their hometown and decided to return to Ohio. Unfortunately, they had lost the right to repurchase their previous house in Logan while they were away, so they had to rent a different place in rural Vinton. In 2008, shortly after returning, Will and Summer welcomed their second child, a daughter named Kale. 2 years later, they had their third child, another daughter named Alana. Despite the difficulties of raising young children, Will and Summer made an effort to carve out time for themselves. Almost every weekend, they entrusted their kids to Bill and Sandra, who happily embraced their roles as grandparents. For this elderly couple, their grandchildren brought immense joy and purpose to their lives. In the spring of 2010, Bill Inman was officially appointed as a pastor of the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith. Alongside his wife, he established a charitable organization named Ranch of Mercy, which was created to assist those in need, particularly people who had lost their jobs or homes. Bill had a vision of constructing a large shelter for orphans and widows, intending to build it himself. Unfortunately, he faced challenges due to insufficient funding to make this dream a reality. Bill proposed holding a lottery to raise funds. He planned to sell tickets for $10 each to reach his financial goal. The winner will receive either a new house or $200,000. Bill also promised to give away 99 other valuable prizes in a raffle. Information about the lottery was shared through local media and advertising. Bill went door to door, encouraging people to support the cause by buying tickets, assuring them that the money raised would be used to build a shelter for those in need. In total, Inman sold 100,000 tickets and raised $1 million. The prize draw is set for September 2010. While Bill was busy with charity work, issues were developing in the Inman family. In June 2010, Summer informed her husband that she wanted a divorce after 6 years of marriage. Before this conversation, she had written a painful entry in her diary, expressing that she was very tired of trying to please everyone and felt exhausted. She questioned whether she deserved happiness and if she had the right to fall in love again and feel loved in return. She acknowledged that it might not be the best time, but she felt the need to tell Will the truth, believing he deserved to know that she did not want to be with him anymore. She mentioned that she needed time alone to figure out who she really was, as she felt like she was just following orders at that moment. Summer emphasized her love for her children, stating that she wouldn't trade them for the world, but she did not want them to see their mother merely obeying someone else. She expressed uncertainty about how Will would react, fearing that he might get angry, try to take the kids, or even threaten her. She believed they should share equal time with the children, but she knew his parents would oppose this and try to persuade her to stay, although she realized that wouldn't change anything. She also recounted that yesterday, Will had asked her what she wanted, but she couldn't answer because all she knew was what she didn't want, to be unhappy and feel trapped. Yet, she remained silent every day, saying that all she could do was cry and sleep. She admitted that she just didn't know how to escape the situation and make everything right, hoping that when she wrote again, she would have found the answer. Summer filed for divorce and moved out of the Inman's house with the children and essential belongings to her parents' home. She wanted to ensure that Alex, Kale, and Alana could still communicate with their father, so she allowed them to visit Will and his parents. 2 months after leaving her husband, Summer began a relationship with Adam Peters. At the same time, she took a job as a cleaner at a bank in downtown Logan, as she had no formal education and struggled to find other employment. Meanwhile, September and October passed, but the drawing that Bill from Ranch of Mercy had promised never took place. It also became clear that construction on the prize house hadn't even started, and the Bill family was slow to refund people's money for the tickets. In early December 2010, the Inmans received notice that they needed to leave their rented home due to unpaid debts. After this news, Summer, accompanied by Adam, went to collect their belongings. However, Will and his parents refused to let her in. Summer called the police, claiming that Will was threatening her and wouldn't return her personal items. When officers arrived, Will continued to deny entry. He threatened to shoot Adam, and even got into a confrontation with a police officer. In her statement, Summer explained that before their wedding, she and Will appeared to have a perfect relationship, but everything changed after they married. Will became controlling and jealous, making unfounded accusations. He dictated her actions and invaded her privacy, affecting her eating habits, household responsibilities, and even their sexual relationship. Summer was so restricted that she couldn't sleep without his permission. He essentially kept her confined to the house and took away her phone and keys. She revealed that Will had always wanted to have 12 children with her and had even considered marrying a second wife. He frequently visited websites for polygamous families, where he shared explicit photos. Will also threatened to kill Summer if she tried to leave him. At one point, he took her cherished cats, drove them far away, and then lied, saying they had escaped through an open window, laughing and claiming she would never see them again. After Summer accused him of wrongdoing, Will attempted to defend his actions by saying he took her phone and keys because he thought she was being unfaithful. Regarding the cats, he claimed he took them to a shelter because they were scratching the furniture and being aggressive to family members. Eventually, Will was ordered to stay away from Summer, and he received a fine and probation for his actions. A custody battle began between the two families. The Inmans reported to the police that Adam Peters posed a danger to Alex, Kaylee, and Alana. A frightening incident occurred late on the night of March 22, 2011. 25-year-old Summer was finishing her shift at the bank. As usual, she cleaned up her workspace and went outside around 11 p.m. to take out the trash. Before leaving, Summer had sent a message to Adam, whom she was supposed to meet after work, but he never saw her again. Concerned, Adam went to the bank after midnight. He couldn't find Summer, but near the trash can he discovered her belongings, her phone, keys, and a running music player with headphones on. A little further away, he found her jacket in the bushes. Adam called the police and notified Summer's parents about her disappearance. Initially, The family thought that she might have been late from work or misplaced her belongings. However, the bank security service informed them that she hadn't been seen since her shift ended. When the police arrived, several witnesses were already present. Two women jogging nearby reported that they had seen Summer being kidnapped about an hour earlier. They explained that as Summer approached a dumpster, a Ford Crown Victoria, driven by a blonde woman, pulled up. Two men wearing black balaclavas exited the vehicle, grabbed Summer, and forced her into the back seat. Despite her attempts to resist, scream, and plead for help, one of the witnesses who tried to intervene was met with pepper spray from the female driver. The kidnappers then drove away with Summer. The two women rushed to the nearest police station to report the incident, but for some reason, law enforcement was skeptical and even suspicious of their account, suspecting they might have fabricated the story for amusement. A whole hour had passed after Summer's parents called the police before they finally arrived at the crime scene. Unfortunately, by that time, it was too late for them to find Summer while the trail was still fresh. News of the abduction of 25-year-old Summer Inman quickly spread through local media. Hundreds of residents of Logan joined the search effort, but as days went by, hope of finding her alive began to fade. Summer's parents struggled to keep their thoughts away from the worst possible outcome. A few weeks prior to the tragedy, Summer had posted a picture on Facebook with Adam and the children, depicting what appeared to be a happy family. This photo infuriated Will Inman, Summer's husband. It had been revealed that Summer met Adam before deciding to divorce Will. In the spring of 2010, Adam started working for the Inmans, maintaining their house and yard, and he soon developed feelings for Summer. Initially, she rejected his advances, but eventually, she gave in. In her diary, she reflected on that moment, expressing that when their eyes met, she realized she had let the devil take hold of her and ignored the warnings from God. She mentioned that she tried to walk away, with her mind screaming to run, but she stayed and allowed Adam to embrace her, expressing her regret and guilt. Meeting Adam marked the beginning of the end for Summer and Will's marriage, as she realized that she wanted to pursue happiness, love, and to be loved, which ultimately led her to file for divorce. 5 days before Summer disappeared, Will attempted to challenge the alimony payments in court. He wanted to reduce the amount he had to pay his ex-wife from $150 per child each month to $50, as his annual income was only $6,500. Will, along with his parents, sought sole custody of the children, but the judge denied their request. Bill and Sandra deeply missed their grandchildren, who were the center of their lives. Since separating from Summer, the elderly couple had visibly lost weight and appeared weary. In March 2011, shortly after Summer went missing, the police found the Inman family, Bill, Sandra, and Will, were hiding in Bill's mother's house in Jackson County, Ohio. During questioning, all three of them consistently denied any involvement in Summer's disappearance. They explained that on the night she vanished, they had traveled to Cleveland to look at a new house. However, their car broke down, and they spent the entire night trying to fix it on the side of the road. They returned home to Logan the following morning. The Inmans stated that they had always treated Summer well and rarely had conflicts with her. However, they noted that after Adam Peters came into their lives, things took a turn for the worse. Bill, Sandra, and Will described Adam as a negative influence who had ruined their previously happy family. The police took an interest in a white Ford Crown Victoria that was parked near the Inman's house. They seized the car's GPS navigator and examined its route. They discovered that on the afternoon of March 22nd, when the kidnapping took place, the car was in Logan. The GPS was turned off at 5:30 p.m. that evening and only activated again the following morning, March 23rd, still in Logan. There was no evidence that the Inman family ever came to Cleveland. Additionally, phone records indicated that the suspects remained in Logan throughout the night from March 22nd to March 23rd. On the morning of March 23rd at 7:30 a.m., Bill, Sandra, and Will were seen at a car wash, where they had the car thoroughly cleaned inside. Summer was not with them. Afterward, the Inmans traveled to Cleveland, where they changed the tires at an auto repair shop. The mechanic found it unusual that Bill chose to replace nearly new tires with older ones. Additionally, the Inmans attempted to alter the car's appearance, and Bill removed a spotlight that he had previously installed near the side mirror. After the arrest, Bill attempted to reassure his elderly mother that they were innocent and that the trials they faced were a form of divine punishment. However, after several hours of intense questioning and realizing that all three could face the death penalty, Sandra eventually broke down. She confessed that they were responsible for the kidnapping of Summer on that tragic night. The men wearing balaclavas were identified as her husband, Bill, and her son, Will. Sandra explained that the abduction was entirely her idea. She intended to scare her daughter-in-law into allowing Will to see their children, but things quickly spiraled out of control. She stated that Will would admit to guilt for both murder and kidnapping. Sandra acknowledged that it was her idea to take Summer, explaining that she believed this would frighten her. Will tied Summer's hands, feet, and neck with plastic ties. Summer struggled and screamed, but then suddenly lost consciousness. Upon noticing that she was unresponsive, Will panicked and wanted to cut her free. He called out to his mother, asking where the knife was because he couldn't find it. As the family desperately searched for the knife, precious minutes passed. It was too late, and Summer had suffocated. Sandra insisted that they never intended to harm their daughter-in-law. Their goal was simply to scare her in order to resolve a custody dispute over the grandchildren so they could see them on weekends. On March 29, 2011, 1 week after the abduction, Sandra revealed the location where they had hidden the body. Summer was placed in an abandoned well on the property of the church that the Inman family attended, known as the Church of the Tabernacle of Faith, which is situated near Nelsonville, 30 kilometers from the bank where Summer worked. Bill Inman had previously helped build this church, and 28 years ago, he and Sandra got married there under its arches. When the police removed the concrete lid from the well, they discovered a disturbing scene. Summer was at the bottom, her body positioned head first. She was dressed in the same outfit she had worn on her last day, a black t-shirt that read, "I don't have an anger problem, I have an idiot problem." The autopsy revealed that Summer had died from strangulation. Besides the marks left by plastic ties on her neck, wrists, and ankles, there were no other injuries on her body. Sandra originally intended to dispose of the body in the river. However, she later thought the church well would be a safer place where it wouldn't be discovered. She confessed to her crime and showed genuine remorse for her actions. The trial soon followed. Bill, 49, and Will, 28, both pleaded not guilty to Summer's murder. Throughout the hearings, they spoke very little and avoided making eye contact with her parents. In contrast, Sandra took full responsibility for the crime, reiterating that the abduction was her idea. As she delivered her final statement, the woman tearfully pleaded for forgiveness from Summer's parents. Overwhelmed with emotion, Sandra clearly expressed her deep regret for the tragic events. "Summer was like a daughter to me," she cried. "If I could turn back time, I would never have made this terrible choice." In 2012, the court sentenced Bill and Will Inman to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sandra received a life sentence but is eligible for parole after 15 years. The church friends and parishioners all agreed that Bill was the one controlling everything in the Inman family. He made all the decisions. No one thought that the idea of the kidnapping came from Sandra. It was well known that Will had been spoiled as a child, with his parents giving in to his every demand. Sandra realized that both her husband and son were as guilty as she was, but she continued to plead guilty, hoping that it would lessen the consequences for them. Alex, Cale, and Alana were cared for by the parents of Summer, who had passed away, for an extended period. They struggled to explain to their grandchildren the absence of their mother, father, grandmother, and grandfather. The tragic story of the Inman family highlights how concealed anger, jealousy, and a need to control others can result in devastating outcomes. Bill and Sandra, who appeared to embody piety and strong family values to everyone, revealed themselves to be oppressive figures to their daughter-in-law. Summer found herself trapped in a toxic relationship that stifled her will and desires. Her efforts to escape ultimately cost her life. Will, who was raised in this oppressive environment, became selfish and resistant to compromise. His obsession with reclaiming his wife and children at any price ultimately led to his downfall. The terrible crime committed by the Inman's family shattered multiple families, leaving 3 young children without their mother and a grandfather and grandmother without their beloved family member. This story highlights the importance of letting go of grudges, respecting others' boundaries, and building relationships based on trust and respect. Holding on to anger can eventually lead to outbursts that damage the most valuable aspects of our lives. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jordan Worth. Alexander Skeel was born on August 17, 1995, in Kingston upon Hull. He grew up in a loving and supportive family. The boys spent their first months in the hospital in special rooms for premature babies, where they fought against very low body weight. Thankfully, with the help of skilled doctors, the children began to recover. However, Alexander's brother gained weight more quickly, and by their first birthday, he showed almost no signs of being premature. In contrast, Alexander was weaker and dealt with a condition called hydrocephalus, which is the excessive buildup of fluid in the brain, leading to him being classified as disabled. Despite these health challenges from birth, Alexander's intellectual growth was unaffected, and physically, he was similar to his classmates. He even participated actively in sports at school. Their parents adored their sons from a young age, showering them with love and care while investing time and money in their education and overall well-being. After graduating from high school, both brothers enrolled in the prestigious Bedford College to continue their studies. Alexander was intelligent, attractive, and made an effort to go to the gym regularly, which helped him gain attention from women. However, unlike his brother, who actively dated and had a vibrant social life, Alexander was shy and preferred to concentrate on his studies. In college, Alexander experienced love at first sight when he met a stunning girl named Jordan Worth. They were the same age, and Jordan came from a wealthy family. Growing up, she was used to getting what she wanted and rarely faced rejection. She always dressed elegantly, took great care of her appearance, and enjoyed a vibrant social life. Jordan was one of the most popular girls on campus and attracted the attention of many admirers. Besides her studies, she volunteered her time, raising funds and providing aid to local shelters for homeless animals as well as to children facing hunger in Africa. Jordan's efforts to make a positive impact were recognized multiple times. At first, her appeared to be an angel, kind, caring, smart, and beautiful. Alexander fell in love with her instantly but assumed that the outgoing and popular Jordan would never notice him. To his surprise, she was also drawn to him and took the first step to get to know him. Although Jordan was more experienced in relationships, for the shy Alexander, she was his very first love. The couple started dating in 2012 when they were both just 17 years old. Initially, their relationship was thriving. They spent a lot of time together and were nearly inseparable. At college, they were often referred to as the most beautiful couple, which made Jordan feel very flattered. The first 6 months of their relationship were filled with love, romance, and mutual respect. They surprised each other with thoughtful gifts and enjoyed celebrating small but meaningful milestones. Their social media accounts were filled with photos of them together, showcasing their happiness and featuring heartfelt captions and declarations of love. To outsiders, it appeared that they were perfect for each other and destined for a long, happy life together. They quickly decided to move in together and rented an apartment. As they were both still students, their parents provided substantial financial support. Fortunately, their parents were supportive of their relationship. Jordan was particularly fond of Alexander's parents because she came across as a responsible young woman with aspirations to become an art history teacher, leaving a positive impression on everyone she met. As time went on, Jordan's behavior started to change. It began with her increasing demands. Each month, she wanted Alexander to update her on everything he did. She openly checked his personal messages on his phone, email, and social media. She would get jealous for no apparent reason. Although this behavior was concerning, Alexander tried to ignore it because he was in love, and it didn't bother him too much. Even when she insisted he wore only the clothes she bought for him, he dismissed it as her way of showing care. Soon, Jordan began to restrict Alexander's social circle. She decided who he could see and who he could no longer stay in touch with, affecting not just his friends and classmates but also his family members. Despite this control, Jordan never complained to anyone, and they still appeared to be a happy and perfect couple in public and on social media. She began to enjoy her control over him. She deleted contacts from Alexander's phone without his knowledge, blocked his family and friends, and even replied to messages on his behalf, often in a rude and insulting way. Afterward, she deleted these conversations, so Alexander had no idea what he had said to people who no longer wanted to communicate with him. The final reason for the breakup occurred when Alexander's twin brother raised concerns. Jordan started to block their communication. By then, their parents also noticed that Alexander was pulling away from the family, while his girlfriend was avoiding them completely. She refused to visit even on holidays and didn't want to talk on the phone. When they did try to reach her, she was openly rude. In the rare moments when Alexander's mother managed to speak with him, she urged him to break up with his girlfriend, warning that the relationship would lead to trouble. However, Alexander, deeply in love, refused to listen and defended his girlfriend, insisting that she cared for him and meant no harm. The Skeel family soon realized that Jordan had pressured their son to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. Meanwhile, she took all the money he earned to spend on her own needs and entertainment. The parents once again tried to talk to their son and persuade him to leave Jordan, but they were unsuccessful. In 2013, during his coming-of-age celebration, Jordan committed a shocking act that went unpunished. That day, she and her friends celebrated at a country hotel. As the evening progressed and guests began to leave, Jordan suddenly vanished without telling anyone. Alexander was distraught as he searched for Jordan, fearing something had happened to her. However, she returned to their room in the morning, heavily intoxicated. When Alexander tried to find out where she had been, she violently lashed out at him with both fists and insults, then laughed. 2 months later, during his own 18th birthday celebration, Jordan started a fight in front of Alexander's family and friends. She assaulted a 15-year-old girl, who was a neighbor well known to the Skeel family and had been invited to the party. Jordan believed the girl was being overly friendly with Alexander, which prompted her to attack, pulling the girl's hair and scratching her face. Jordan was still upset, but it was obvious to everyone what her true nature was. Afterward, her parents and brother urged Alexander to break up with her because of her aggressive and inappropriate behavior. Surprisingly, for the first time, he listened to them and acknowledged that she had indeed overreacted. That same evening, he spoke with her and informed her that he would not be returning to their apartment and would instead stay at his parents' house. After nearly 6 months apart, they reunited and had children together. During that time, Alexander focused on his studies and work, rarely thinking of Jordan. However, on New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised him with a call to share the news that she was pregnant and they would be parents in the spring. Alexander felt both surprised and happy. Jordan apologized for not telling him sooner, explaining that she believed he no longer wanted to see her. When the guy's parents found out they were going to have a grandchild, they were overjoyed and invited Jordan to move in with them. She accepted the offer and moved into the Skeel family home. She officially got married with Alexander, and 3 months later, she and Alexander welcomed a son named William. The young parents were extremely happy, and they enjoyed a peaceful and harmonious life together until around mid-fall 2014. During this time, Jordan genuinely cared for her partner, made an effort to please him, and fell in love with him again. When William was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. During this time, she became moody and emotional, insisting that Alexander move out of his parents' house immediately. Alexander attributed her behavior to hormonal changes but agreed to rent an apartment for them in the city, and they soon moved in. In the summer of 2015, they welcomed their second child, a girl named Alice. Alexander was overjoyed and treated his wife and children with great affection. However, Jordan, feeling secure that Alexander would not leave her, began to reveal her darker side. The turning point occurred after the move. Jordan prohibited her husband from contacting his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Meanwhile, she accepted financial help from them and even had Alexander ask his parents for money. Within a few months, she completely dominated him, breaking his spirit and taking control of his life. Jordan frequently humiliated and insulted her husband, and eventually, she began to hit him. At first, her attacks were not severe, as she wanted to see how he would react. When she realized he would tolerate everything, keep quiet, and face no consequences for her actions, she unleashed her cruelty, revealing her violent tendencies. The trouble began during their house renovation when she was unhappy with everything Alexander did. Frustrated, he remarked that it seemed impossible to satisfy her. In response, she threw a hammer at him, hitting him on the head and causing a deep wound. Dazed and nearly unconscious, he fell to the ground, holding his head as blood streamed down his face. He asked his wife for help or to call an ambulance, but she coldly told him, "Crawl away somewhere and die," and walked into another room to watch TV. Alexander treated his head injury on his own without visiting a doctor or telling anyone. This led Jordan to believe she could do anything without consequences, convinced her husband would never report her actions and would avoid both hospitals and the police. For the next 3 years, Alexander endured constant emotional and physical suffering. He became so depressed that he didn't recognize the threat he was under. Despite this, he continued to work hard to provide for his family, but his frustration and dissatisfaction with his wife grew steadily. Jordan not only controlled him every day but also escalated the cruelty. He was not allowed to sleep on the bed and had to lie on the floor next to the bed, without a blanket or pillow. He was also banned from entering the kitchen and could only eat the leftovers that his wife and children didn't finish. This left Alexander starving. As he was unable to buy food, Jordan had taken all his money. Furthermore, his wife deprived him of sleep and rest, creating a cruel form of entertainment for herself. Whenever he finally fell asleep, she would hit him on the head or pour boiling water on him. He later remembered waking up each time in intense pain, either bleeding or burned. After that, he would tend to his wounds with whatever he could find, while his wife quietly went to bed. Alexander viewed this situation as normal. He felt morally defeated and stopped trying to fight against it. He completely cut off communication with his parents and brother, and his wife frequently asked them for money on his behalf. She also supported her own parents financially, ensuring she could afford whatever she wanted. Alexander lost a significant amount of weight and dropped below 50 pounds. His body was frequently marked by wounds, cuts, burns, and bruises, which drew concern from others. At his workplace, colleagues encouraged him to seek medical help, but his wife insisted he quit his job to avoid being discovered. After he was let go, he became trapped with Jordan, who began to abuse him continuously, leaving him longing for rescue. Although the couple appeared to be happy to outsiders, their home life was filled with horror. Jordan managed social media accounts for her husband, frequently sharing old photos of their family along with captions expressing their love and gratitude for one another. Nobody could have imagined that a woman who looked angelic and was a mother of two could transform into a sophisticated monster behind closed doors. She knocked out her husband's teeth and inflicted a deep cut on his arm with a knife. His body also showed signs of burns, but he was unable to go to the hospital. At home, he had only plastic wrap and tape, which he used to bind his wounds. Neighbors often heard screams coming from their house, and some were so alarming that they called the police. However, Jordan always managed to convince the officers that everything was fine between her and her husband. During the next visit by the police, prompted by neighbors' concerns, one officer noticed a man with a fresh wound and blood running down his arm. The man appeared emaciated and had bruises of various sizes on his face. Jordan attempted to explain to the officer that her husband was mentally unstable and sometimes harmed himself. However, this time the police called for paramedics, and Alexander was taken to the hospital. The doctors were shocked by his condition. He was barely alive, and his arm was so severely injured that amputation was a real possibility. Alexander had severe second and third-degree burns covering his body. He weighed just 94 pounds, and his shoulder ligaments were injured from being hit with a screwdriver. He also had a deep cut on his forearm, several knocked-out teeth, and many bruises. During this time, Jordan entered the hospital, insisting that her husband be released to her. She claimed that he was fine and that he had caused all his injuries himself. However, no one believed her distressed claims, and it was decided to take her to the police station for questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing and stuck to her claim that her husband was harming himself. However, when Alexander's parents arrived at the police station after visiting him in the hospital, her attitude changed. She went on to explain in detail the actions she had taken against her husband, saying she had trained him like a dog and that he couldn't escape from her. At the same time, Jordan argued that her husband's behavior provoked her violence, alleging he was cheating on her and intentionally trying to upset her. She also maintained that he was mentally ill and had a tendency to self-harm. The man's parents firmly denied all the claims made against him. However, he hesitated to speak out against his wife at first. It was only after receiving treatment and consulting with a psychologist that Alexander found the courage to share the traumatic experiences he endured at home in recent years. Jordan believed that she would only receive a minor administrative penalty, so she was not particularly concerned about the upcoming trial. After reviewing all the evidence, the judge convicted 22-year-old Jordan of deliberately causing serious harm, both physical and emotional abuse, as well as coercive control. She received a prison sentence of 7.5 years. Her status as a mother of 2 young children did not lessen the severity of her punishment. Jordan was taken aback by this sentence, as the case was unprecedented in the UK. The children were placed in the care of their father and grandparents during their mother's imprisonment. After fully recovering from years of abuse, Alexander began working in the community and is now helping victims of domestic violence. On July 4, 2023, Jordan was released on parole after serving 5 years of her 7.5-year sentence. However, she is not allowed to approach her ex-husband or see their children. She is currently engaged to a bricklayer named Adam Stepp and is getting ready to become a mother for the 3rd time. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jock Waller. June 1, 2011 marked a turning point in the life of the Jock Waller family. That day, Jock called her sister Cheryl to say that she was going to pick up her children from her ex-husband Clay Waller and would be home later. However, Jock never returned and did not call back. After trying to contact her sister without success, Cheryl became increasingly worried. To address her concerns, she drove to the police station around 7 p.m. At the station, Cheryl announced that Clay Waller had killed younger sister. It was a shocking statement for all the police, as Jock had only called Cheryl a few hours earlier and there was no reason to be alarmed and assumed that she was in trouble. But it turned out that Cheryl's hunch was correct, and her sister Jock was indeed caught up in a macabre story. So what happened to Jock, and what made Cheryl really believe that Clay Waller had killed her sister even before Jock was reported missing? Jock was a sweet, kind, and caring girl when she met Clay, and they hit it off. Clay had a stutter that caused some people to make fun of him, which made him feel self-conscious. Jock, however, was different. She never made fun of him and always protected him, making sure he didn't get hurt. That was her nature. She protected the vulnerable, fought against injustice, and helped people. As their love blossomed, Jock and Clay became closer and eventually married when they were in their 30s. They bought a small house in Sanguine View, Missouri, and Jock was building a family there. Jock had a successful career, unlike her husband, whose life was constantly failing and couldn't stay in one place for long. As a result, Jock was the sole provider for the family. She had always dreamed of having children, and when she found out she was pregnant, she was overjoyed. She was even more delighted to learn that she would be having triplets. The couple welcomed 2 daughters, Avery and Addison, and a son named Maddox. Caring for 3 newborns at once was a huge challenge for Jock, but she did not complain. Instead, she took on the responsibility alone, as her husband seemed indifferent to the children. Clay took a job at the sheriff's office to support the family while his wife took care of the children, but he did not stay long. He was fired after a year, and during that time, only Jock's parents and sister helped her with the children so she could rest. After Clay lost her job, Jock began working to support the family. Despite having a child, Clay did not change his habits and showed little interest in his family or his job. Occasionally, he took on a part-time job, but it did not bring in the income they needed. He seemed content to live off Jock, who worked 40 hours a week while still caring for the children. Jock's career took off, leading her to a management position at an insurance company. However, this success only made her husband more comfortable, and he decided not to worry about money anymore. Instead of appreciating his wife, Clay abused her in every way possible. He insulted her, called her worthless, and told her that no one wanted her. He had affairs with other women. Jock's parents and sister were extremely outraged by her husband's behavior and convinced her to divorce him. However, at that time, Jock was not ready for such an extreme choice and tried to keep her family together. Every day, any hope of saving her marriage went up in smoke before her eyes. A few years later, the couple began to have problems. They were in financial trouble because her husband was not working and Jock's salary was not enough to support their growing family. The mortgage debts kept mounting and they were in danger of losing their home. Jock decided to move in with her sister, while her husband stayed with a friend. By this time, the children were a little older and Jock made the difficult but necessary decision for herself to get a divorce because she felt that she and the children deserved a better life. She talked to her husband about it, and at first, Clay took the news calmly. However, he later changed his mind and refused to divorce. Clay began to threaten Jock. At first, the threats were indirect and vague, but eventually, he directly threatened her life, claiming that divorcing him would be a death sentence for her and the children. This scared Jock, but she did not give up on her decision. She could not continue living this way and sought to distance herself from her husband. Jock confided in her family about Clay's behavior and kept a diary of his disturbing actions. She also noted that her husband had been following her. At the time, Jock and the children were staying with her sister. The children, who were only 5 years old, did not understand the situation, but Jock explained that it was necessary. Eventually, things began to return to normal and the divorce proceedings were almost complete. Clay seemed to have accepted the divorce and stopped bothering Jock. The two began to move forward and began to build a new relationship. Jock allowed her husband to visit the children and they stopped arguing. On June 1, 2011, Clay and Jock scheduled a meeting at the lawyer's office to discuss the final important details of the divorce. That day, their son Maddox was with his father, while the other children were at Jock's sister Cheryl's house. After the meeting, Jock planned to pick up her son. When she left the office, she called her sister Cheryl and told her everything had gone well. She drove to Clay's house to pick up her son and then made plans to return to her sister's house. That was their last conversation. Jock, 39, never heard from her again. Over time, Cheryl grew worried and started calling Jock, but she didn't answer. Cheryl then tried calling Clay, but he didn't answer either. Cheryl suspected that Clay might have done something to Jock, so she texted him, "If I don't hear from Jock in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police." Clay immediately called her back, asking what was wrong. Cheryl replied that he knew exactly what she meant. But Clay insisted that he did not know where Jock was and promised to tell her to call Cheryl back when he saw her. Doubting him, Cheryl took younger sister children to her parents' house and filed a police report herself. The police were wary of Cheryl's claim that Clay was involved in her sister's disappearance, but did not send her home to wait for 24 hours to pass. Instead, they quickly decided to contact Clay to find out if there was any clue as to Jock's whereabouts. They called Clay, and he said that he had lunch with Jock. He said that they had met at the lawyer's office to discuss some aspects of the divorce and then drove to his house to talk further. He said they had a chat and then he went to the store. When he returned, Jock's car was gone and he assumed that she had left. According to Clay, their son Maddox was in Illinois with his new girlfriend at the time, and Jock knew this and was not concerned about their son. He insisted that she had come to his house just to talk, not for their son. Clay's words seemed hard to believe. Jock had made it clear to her sister that she had come to Clay's house for her son. She had no intention of discussing anything with him, especially since she would not allow her son to be with another woman so far away. She would have been furious with Clay in that situation. Cheryl did not believe the story. She convinced the police that Clay was lying and hiding something, and that things were indeed serious. Jock and her car were reported missing, and a massive search began. Hours later, Jock's car, a Honda Pilot, was found on the interstate with flat tires. It was no accident. The tires had been deliberately punctured and looked like they had been set up. The car was found open and empty, with some blood on the back seat, but there were no clues to Jock's whereabouts. It seemed increasingly likely that she had been attacked and kidnapped. The search for Jock focused on that area, with many volunteers working alongside police and rescue dogs. Despite the unbearable heat, people were eager to help. The family offered a $3,500 reward for any information about Jock's whereabouts. Despite their efforts, the search was unsuccessful. The police began to focus more on her ex-husband, Clay. They went to his house to talk to him again, but Clay repeated the same story. When police asked to search his home and car, Clay refused and immediately hired a lawyer to defend his rights. For days after she disappeared, Clay left his wife a tearful voicemail, "Hi honey, it's Sunday. I went missing on Wednesday. Please, if you get this message, call me. I don't know where you are and I miss you so much. Please call me." The police then obtained a search warrant and returned to his home. While examining the car, they discovered stains that looked like blood. The forensic team collected samples and sent them for testing, which showed that they were fish blood. It turned out that Clay had intentionally covered the car with fish blood to throw the forensic experts off. When the house was inspected, it was noticed that the floor had no carpet. A section of the floor had been cut out, leaving a noticeable mark. Small drops of blood were found on the basement hallway wall. There were signs that furniture had been moved. Something unusual was going on in the house. The forensic team checked under the floor and discovered a bloody carpet. Blood and carpet samples were sent to the lab for analysis. The police tracked Jacques' last movements. At 1:10 a.m., she was seen at a pharmacy with her ex-husband. They appeared to be normal. 2 hours later, Jacques was caught on camera. ATM security recorded the withdrawal. Jacques did not appear on the surveillance camera afterward, while Clay did. Hours later, Clay, his son, and his new girlfriend went to a toy store. They then went to a car wash in his pickup truck, which had a suspicious trash can inside. Clay changed clothes and washed the car and boat. Suspicion grew around Clay, and he became the prime suspect. Police released photos of Clay's pickup truck and boat, asking any witnesses who saw them to come forward. A young couple reported seeing Clay near Devil's Island on the Mississippi River, which was later confirmed by Clay's cell phone records. This prompted police to conduct a search of the area, but despite their efforts, nothing was found. At that time, forensic testing revealed that drops of blood found in Clay's home matched those of the missing woman, Jacques. Based on this evidence, the police suspected that Jacques was likely dead. The police brought Clay in for questioning and attempted to get him to confess to the murder. However, he refused to admit to any wrongdoing, instead claiming that it was old blood from a domestic violence incident in the kitchen. Without a body, the police could not arrest a suspect and charge him. They released Clay but continued to monitor and investigate him. Clay, who had worked as a deputy sheriff, knew full well that the police were watching him, and he played a cat-and-mouse game with them. He would go to deserted vacant lots to disrupt the investigation while the entire neighborhood was involved in the search for Jacques, the missing mother of 3 children. Clay continued to harass the search party and Jacques' family. He drove by, insulting them and yelling that they were wasting their time, claiming that they wouldn't find anything. His defiant behavior raised more and more suspicions. Meanwhile, Jacques' sister, Cheryl, sought custody of the triplets, fearing for their safety as Clay was their father. Clay's erratic behavior eventually led to Cheryl gaining custody, which angered him even more. He began threatening Cheryl with violence, even posting about it on social media. Cheryl recorded these threats and reported them to the police. Nearly 5 months after Jacques' disappearance, police arrested Clay and charged him with making threats to death. Although he admitted to the charges, Clay claimed he acted out of anger and despair over losing custody of the children, with no intention of harming Cheryl. He believes he is the victim in this situation. During the investigation, police discover that Clay is being accused of stealing $50,000 from a previous company and stalking a man. Despite this, Clay denies any involvement in Jacques' disappearance. When questioned, Clay claims that Jacques' new lover, Harry, is responsible for her death. However, police investigate Harry and discover that he has a solid alibi, eliminating him as a suspect. The evidence points to Clay, but he continues to deny any wrongdoing. He is eventually sentenced to 5 years in prison for threatening his wife's sister, Cheryl. Police continue to investigate Jacques' disappearance, searching Devil's Island but finding no trace of her. 2 years after her disappearance, police had gathered enough circumstantial evidence, including video footage and blood found in Clay's home, to charge him with Jacques' murder, even though her body had never been found. It was a risky move, because if they lost, the DA's office would not be able to charge him a second time. However, the prosecutor was determined. Clay, after consulting with his attorney, made a deal with the prosecutor to reduce his sentence. Clay offered to plead guilty to murder and provide a burial site. Jacques' family agreed to the deal because it was important to find her body and give her a proper burial. Clay led police to his ex-wife's burial site. It was located in a remote location on a sandbar on the Illinois side of the Mississippi River. The initial investigation was hampered because Clay could not remember the exact tree in which he had buried Jacques' body. However, he eventually revealed that he had placed a bag of fertilizer on top of her grave. A gardener pointed out that large amounts of fertilizer could kill trees, leading the police to focus on 3 dead trees in the area. When they dug up the grave, they found Jacques' body under one of the trees, wearing the same clothes she had last worn. The woman was identified from dental records as Jacques Waller. The discovery of Jacques' body brought closure to her loved ones, who were finally able to hold a funeral for her. Ironically, the ceremony was held on her parents' 50th wedding anniversary. At this time, Cheryl had to tell her children that their mother had died and that their father was responsible for her death. This revelation was devastating to the children, who not only lost their mother, but also their relationship with their father. The children immediately shunned Clay and refused to communicate with him. As part of his plea agreement, Clay was required to provide a detailed confession of his crimes. According to his statement, he began thinking about murder a year before Jacques died, after she announced that she wanted to end their relationship. Despite these dark thoughts, he initially pushed them aside because Jacques was the mother of his children. Clay felt he couldn't let Jacques take his children. He had warned her earlier that if she continued to do so, things would not end well for her, but she chose to ignore him. The night before the murder, he had dug a grave for Jacques on Devil's Island. It was then that he began to consider taking her life. At the time, their divorce seemed to be going smoothly. After visiting a lawyer, the couple had a conversation in which Jacques suggested they have one last intimate encounter together. They went to his house, where they continued the conversation in the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator to find a snack. When he raised his head, he accidentally hit Jacques on the head, causing her nose to bleed. This enraged her, and she stormed out into the hallway. She began screaming that he would never see their children again. This was Clay's breaking point. In a fit of rage, he punched her in the face and then strangled her. After the fight, he dumped Jacques' body in a prepared grave on Devil's Island. He then cleaned up the crime scene by washing his car, cleaning the house, and showering. He changed into new clothes and attempted to resume his normal routine by meeting his new girlfriend and son at a toy store, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Clay claimed the murder was an impulsive act driven by emotion, contradicting his earlier statement about digging the grave the day before. This inconsistency raised suspicions of premeditated murder. The medical examiner's report showed that the victim had suffered multiple skull fractures, consistent with blunt force trauma rather than a simple fight. Clay's initial story was not believed. Clay seemed content with his 20-year sentence for second-degree murder, showing no remorse for killing his ex-wife Jacques. However, the prosecution had a surprising twist. The hole he dug to bury Jacques was in another state, Illinois, and the murder took place in Missouri. These features fall under federal laws against domestic violence across states, and he violated them. This allowed him to add 35 years to his sentence. Clay Waller would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of his 55-year sentence. Clay had no idea that his confession would have serious consequences due to a federal law he was unaware of. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Polly Klaas. Polly Hannah Klaas was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California, USA. Her family included her father Mark, mother Eva, and younger sister Annie. After her parents' divorce when she was very young, Polly and Annie lived with their mother in Petaluma, California. As for Mark, he had a new relationship after the divorce, and Polly got along very well with this woman. Overall, their family was very harmonious, and she spent time with both her mother and father, with no problems between them. Polly was a quiet and innocent child who had a few close friends but was generally very shy. However, she found confidence and joy in theater, participating in various school plays and community musicals where she often took the lead role. Her main aspiration is to become a talented musical theater actress. Aside from theater, Polly loves hosting and attending sleepovers with her friends, a regular activity shared among her close-knit group. On October 1, 1993, Polly asked her mother if she could have two friends, Jillian and Kate, over for a sleepover. Her mother agreed, and the two friends arrived at Polly's house in the afternoon. They had dinner together, and the evening went smoothly until Polly's mother went to bed around 9:45 p.m. due to a bad headache. She told the girls that she was going to sleep and asked them to wake her up if they needed any help at any time. After taking 2 sleeping pills, she fell into a deep sleep. The calm night was disrupted after 11 p.m. when Eva, Polly's mother, was jolted awake by the screams of Jillian and Kate. The two girls frantically told her that a man had broken into the house and taken Polly away. Eva made an emergency call to the police and then went to check on her other daughter, Annie, who was in her room, seemingly unaware of the incident. When the police arrived, they started questioning Polly's 2 friends, Jillian and Kate. The girls explained they were in a room, select on a Halloween costume and just having fun. As the night wore on, around 11 p.m., Polly suggested it was time to go to bed, and her friends agreed. She offered to get the inflatable bed she and her mom had set up earlier so the 3 could sleep together. However, when Polly opened the door to her room, a man was standing in front of them, holding a knife and not wearing a mask. Since Halloween approached, 3 girls initially thought man's threatening claims were a prank and burst into laughter. However, the man's facial expression quickly turned to anger, causing them to realize the situation was more serious. He swiftly forcing the girls into a room, where he bound their hands and feet with rope. When questioned about who lived in the house, all 3 girls, including Jillian and Kate, provided the same answer: Polly. Next, the man removed the pillowcases from the pillows and placed them over Jillian and Kate's heads, preventing them from seeing. He instructed the girls to count up to 1,000, assuring them that he would temporarily take Polly away but return her shortly. Unbeknownst to the man, the girls peered through gaps in the pillowcases and noticed his swift departure. Then, they attempted to release themselves from the restraints. After about 30 minutes of struggle, they managed to break free. Upon escaping the room, they immediately sought out Eva to inform her that her daughter Polly had been taken by the man. Jillian and Kate provided the police with a detailed account of the events. They also gave a brief description of the man, who had not worn a mask and covered his face, allowing the girls to get a clear look at him. As a result, the police were able to create a sketch of the suspect to aid in the search. The investigation at Polly's house did not yield much evidence. Several footprints were found, but they all belonged to Polly, her family members, or friends who had visited the house recently. However, some unusual fibers were discovered on the carpet, which did not match the carpet in Polly's house. Further analysis revealed that these fibers likely came from the carpet of a vehicle. The police then analyzed the cars of individuals who were known to the family and had visited the house, but none of them matched the fibers. This led to the assumption that the fibers were from the kidnapper's vehicle. A palm print was discovered at the scene. At that time, fingerprinting and DNA technology had not yet advanced to the point where it could be compared to a database. However, the print was preserved for potential future use if a suspect was later identified. In Polly's room, a piece of fabric resembling silk was also found. The fabric had a distinctive pattern and appeared to have been cut from a garment with scissors. The police believed this fabric could serve as a valuable clue in the future. A hair was discovered, but its origin remained unknown since DNA analysis was not advanced enough to thoroughly examine it at the time. Polly's case generated one of the largest searches in the United States at that time. Thousands of volunteers joined the search, with 4,000 people combing neighborhoods, vacant lots, and large estates near her home. The police also attempted to locate drivers matching the suspect's description, but all did not bring any results. The police had a narrow 24-hour window to locate Polly after her disappearance, as chances of finding her alive would significantly decrease beyond that time frame. To expedite the investigation, they handed the case over to the FBI and launched an urgent search. However, as the days went by, hopes of a safe recovery of Polly began to dwindle. During the investigation, police inquired about witnesses in the neighborhood, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual on the night of the abduction. Several neighbors reported seeing a suspicious individual lurking around the area, describing him as peculiar-looking. They didn't think much of it at the time because they had no reason to believe the man was capable of committing a serious crime like kidnapping. As a result, they failed to report the incident to the authorities. The police shared a sketch of the suspect with the neighbors, based on a description provided by Polly's friends. The neighbors all recognized the man in the sketch. In a separate investigation, the police also questioned the teachers and staff at Polly's school to see if anyone knew the man or had any information about Polly's disappearance. Unfortunately, no one at the school had any knowledge about the man or the incident surrounding Polly's disappearance. The staff members all had alibis for the time in question, and none of them matched the description or resembled the sketch of suspects. The police have conducted a thorough and comprehensive investigation of the case, they comparing a fiber found in Polly's house to the car mats of teachers and school staff vehicles, but unfortunately, no matches were found. Over time, feelings of hopelessness and fear grew, not only for Polly's family but also for the authorities and the general public. Everyone is concerned about the threat this criminal may pose to society, so they demand that the police quickly solve the case. To gather more information, a $200,000 reward was offered to anyone providing information that could aid in locating Polly. This reward was funded by actress Winona Ryder, who also held a press conference to publicly appeal kidnapper for Polly's safe return. At the time, the internet was still in its early stages, and law enforcement agencies, including the police and the FBI, were unfamiliar with using the internet to locate missing persons. To assist in the investigation, 3 individuals from California took matters into their own hands. They created and posted a picture of Polly, a sketch of her suspected kidnapper, and an advertisement for a reward for any information that could lead to her safe return. Although social media platforms did not exist at the time, other online communication tools were available. As a result, approximately 25 million people in the United States viewed Polly's picture online. Initially, FBI investigators believed that the internet could play a crucial role in the investigation. Although the disappearance became increasingly well known, but internet users do not bring any valuable information. However, this has attracted many volunteers to help, and telephone switchboards were established with hundreds of information every day. This thing also brings hope in the families of other missing children, who reached out to Polly's family to support and assistance, hoping that by working together, they might be able to find their own missing children. The investigators were growing increasingly frustrated. It has been many weeks since Polly was kidnapped, and they had yet to uncover any leads. The identity of the kidnapper remained a mystery, and without any DNA evidence, they were unable to make a match. Not even a hair or palm print had been left found, leaving them feeling helpless. Finally, a new breakthrough in the case has come. A phone call was called to Polly's father, Mark. On the other end of the line, he heard a girl's voice that sounded uncannily like his daughter's. She claimed to be Polly and told Mark that she was being held at a hotel. The kidnapper had momentarily left her alone, and that's why she was able to contact he. However, before Mark could glean any more information, the girl hung up. Mark immediately rushed to the police station to tell the news. Unfortunately, The FBI at the time lacked the advanced technology to track a call that had already been disconnected. All they could do was wait anxiously for the kidnapper to make another move, so they can only sit and wait for a new call, hoping to trace it. A few hours after the first call, the same girl who had spoken to Mart called again. The police managed to trace the call, but found it odd that the location was not a hotel, as the girl claimed, but a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived and knocked on the door of the house where the call originated, they discovered it was a prank. It turned out a teenage girl, close to Polly's age, lived there, so their voices were similar. She explained that her friends had dared her to do it. The girl was not arrested or taken to the police station. Instead, her parents were advised to monitor her behavior and remind her not to joke about such serious issues. On November 28, 1993, nearly 2 months after Polly disappeared, police received a call from a woman. She reported that she found 3 suspicious items on a several-acre plot of land she owned. The police, along with the FBI, went to the location and found 3 critical pieces of evidence: a piece of silk identical to one in Polly's room, a pair of ballet shoes that Eva claimed were missing from the house the night Polly vanished, and some duct tape. These evidence led the police to suspect that Polly might have been in the area. Before all this evidence was discovered, on the day Polly disappeared, the same woman went to the police to report a problem. Strangers had been wandering onto her plot of land. She owned a lot of land, which was mostly forest, and had only one small house inside. Although there were signs indicating it was private property, there was no fence to keep people out, so many unknowingly crossed onto her land. Although her land had many intruders, but one particular out in her memory. On the night Polly was abducted, a man drove up to her house in his car, which got stuck in the mud. The nanny, who was caring for the woman's son, was the first to notice the man but didn't approach him because she was too scared. The homeowner also didn't approach him, as she thought he looked angry. They decided to call the police. When the officers arrived, they interrogated the man about why he was there. He explained that he hadn't realized it was private property and promised to leave quickly. However, he requested their assistance in getting his car out of the mud. The officers noticed that the man seemed very nervous, scared, and sweaty, and he also appeared to be under the influence of drugs. Since they were unable to conduct a drug test at the time and the man was not acting aggressively, they were unable to arrest him. The officers helped him out of the mud, and he eventually drove away. This man was Richard Allen Davis, born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. His childhood was troubled due to the violence inflicted by his parents. When he was 12, his parents separated. His mother completely disowned him, saying she wanted nothing to do with him, and left him with his father. Richard's father was very irresponsible, often leaving the house for hours or even days. Richard was frequently left alone, sometimes staying with neighbors and sometimes staying with some of his relatives. During his teenage years, Richard began engaging in criminal activities such as stealing and fighting, which led to several months in reform school. At 17, Richard committed a violent robbery that almost resulted in the victim's death. The judge offered him a choice: go to reform school or join the U.S. Army. Richard chose the Army but was dishonorably discharged in less than 2 years. As he grew older, his criminal record grew longer. Around the age of 20, he was sentenced to 15 years for robbery and kidnapping, but was released after 1 year on parole for good behavior. During that period, Richard was troubled by another accusation. Many of his friends suspected him of killing a 19-year-old girl named Marlene, even though the police acknowledged that she had left voluntarily. However, those close to Marlene believed Richard was responsible for her death, occurring the night they attended a party together. These were merely rumors, with no evidence to support them. When Polly went missing, Richard was having a difficult time, and he had no fixed address, so his whereabouts were unclear. The police distributed a special leaflet exclusively to officers, urging them to be extremely cautious. They withheld information from the media due to concerns that Richard might flee California or even the United States. On November 13, 1993, Richard was arrested while driving under the influence of alcohol. A police officer stopped him, and he failed a breathalyzer test. Upon checking Richard's name and picture, the officer recognized him as the suspect wanted in the Polly kidnapping case. The officer carefully informed Richard that he was being arrested for violating probation due to drunk driving. Richard complied and was taken to the police station. There, officers read him his rights and revealed that he was actually being held for the kidnapping of Polly. Richard was taken in for questioning. The investigation was careful and he eventually admitted to kidnapping Polly. His palm print matched exactly with the one found at Polly's house, and carpet fibers from his car matched those found in the house. Polly's friends were brought to the police station for questioning and immediately identified Richard as the kidnapper. Additionally, a piece of silk identical to one found in Polly's room was discovered in his car and on the piece of land of the woman who reported the incident to the police. All evidence pointed to Richard, leading he to finally confess. He explained that he had been using substances with friends that day and felt unwell. He decided to break into a house in a neighborhood to commit a burglary. Richard drove around until he reached Polly's neighborhood. Seeing an open window, he entered the house. He stated that he hadn't planned the incident, didn't know Polly or her family, and hadn't been following them. He was searching for valuables but didn't find much. As he was about to leave, Polly opened the bedroom door and saw him. Richard noted that she was very frightened and, in his panic, decided to take her. He stated that he put Polly in his car and started driving, eventually stopping in a vacant lot where he assaulted her. Afterwards, he got back into the driver's seat. When the woman and the babysitter spotted Richard on private piece of land, Polly was in the back seat. Police officers helped him retrieve his car from the mud, and at that point, Polly was still alive, which deeply frustrated officers as they believed her life could have been saved. After the car was pushed out of the mud, Richard drove down the highway, strangled Polly to death, and left her body there. Richard reported the exact location of the grave to the police, leading to a search that took place on December 4, 1993, 2 months 3 days after the girl was abducted. Polly's body was found in a grave beside the highway, dug by Richard himself. The forensic examination mainly confirmed the cause of death as strangulation, consistent with Richard's account. The date of her death was approximately the same day she disappeared. With all the evidence, Richard Allen Davis was put on trial for kidnapping, murdering, and raping Polly Klaas. During the trial, Richard had a chance to speak. Besides apologizing to the family, he accused Polly's father of sexually abusing her. Richard claimed that Polly had told him not to do to her what her father did to her. This accusation enraged Polly's father, who nearly attacked Richard, but the people present compartment him. Richard's words shocked everyone, not only because he didn't apologize but also because they doubted the truth of his claim about Polly's father. On June 18, 1996, Richard Allen Davis was found guilty of kidnapping and murdering Polly Klaas. In August, he was sentenced to death. He tried to overturn the death sentence but failed. In 2006, Richard overdosed on pills in his cell but was revived and returned to prison. In 2009, his lawyer attempted to appeal his conviction to the Supreme Court but was unsuccessful. The Supreme Court upheld his death sentence.